Declare the meeting now open. Remind members that all committee meetings held in public session are recorded and that all electronic devices, with the exception of the new committee tablets, interfere with recording equipment in committee rooms, even if in silent mode. So we can advise members to switch off their mobile phones and any other electronic devices. Can remind members maybe to declare any interest where appropriate today. Today's business, the committee will receive 3 briefings today. Firstly, we will receive a briefing on the financing of NI Water. This briefing had to be cancelled from a previous meeting due to time pressures. We will then receive briefings on the recent TransLink fare increases from the Consumer Council and the Department TransLink. The committee will also consider some information on the road traffic speed limits bill and its inquiry on the benefits of cycling to the economy. Agenda item number 1, there's apologies from Joe Byrne. Agenda item number 2, yesterday afternoon I had an opportunity to meet the Minister just for a few minutes to give me a very, very brief outline on what he's on the radio today about in relation to his pressures and the cut within his budget. I mean, while I do welcome the fact that the Minister did afford us opportunity, but he actually didn't give us any details. So, on one hand, it was useful, and on the other hand, it wasn't much, just because we didn't really get any information from that meeting other than this. It was 4 warnings. There was a statement that was imminent, and as you've all heard, then the Minister's been on the press since that.
Chair, would not have appropriate to come to the full committee to give detail, as you say?
Yeah, I mean, well, I was accompanied yesterday with Gavin because Paul was in other business, and there was very little detail even what I got yesterday. And I mean, I did push the Minister. He did talk about how devastating this was, and I mean, we can't underestimate that. I mean, I think we all know that each of the departments are under immense pressure. But whenever I looked at it yesterday after I met him, we were only talking about a 0.16% cut of his budget. Some of the pressures is how his department's already been managed. So, I mean, we did push him on the resource budget, and I mean, unfortunately, the Minister couldn't even answer us how much that cut was yesterday. So, I take your point, Chris. I think whilst he did afford me the opportunity yesterday for a brief meeting, and he was keen to meet, to be fair to him, I think it would have been better if he could have come to the committee. Should have even been in closed session and give us all the figures, so as we knew exactly where we're coming from. So.
It's not like it hasn't been an issue that we've been raising in the committee. We have been for the last few weeks, and it was the level of detail to date, if I'm not wrong, was that there was a pressure of around 14–15 million, which today has become 60 million. I still think it's an issue that the Minister needs to come to the committee on.
Well, I mean, it's in the table papers today, but yeah, I take your point. I think that's a fair point. I think so. Maybe if the
Chairperson,
Permanent Secretary is due on the 25th.
I have no problem with you as Chairman or Vice Chairman meeting the Minister. What really is the problem is you've had nothing really to feed back.
Nothing at all.
Other than what we've heard this morning. And we do know that rural services were mentioned. There are many people have no other form of transport. Town services, which are largely to working class housing, or again, the alternative is taxis, which are expensive. I suppose we have to be grateful for the crumbs from the table. Before this, the Minister didn't even bother to tell anybody what he was for doing. Well, that's progress, but it's very small work in progress.
Well, I mean, the meeting lasted less than 10 minutes, and say the detail we got was sparse, to say the least. I mean, I didn't come out of the room with any sense of exactly where the money was coming from. There was suggestions that, I mean, some of the usual targets are going to be hit again: street lighting and potholes, and I think he is coming on saying that today. Yeah. But I did say to him yesterday that, and I think we all should remember that there was additional money actually given to him specifically for street lights because of the impact that it was actually having, which was over and above his. And that was additional money that was given to him. So he did say yesterday that he hoped he had enough in relation to streetlights. I think he can go to June, wasn't it?
Yep, until
June. You know, but there was additional money given to him for that purpose.
I could just come back again very, very briefly. I mean, those are the revenue issues, the day-to-day stuff, the streetlight, potholes and so on. Well, I have a letter here dated 26th of February, Chairman, which suggests that the money in his capital programme is not healthy either. Because you will know, and other members will know, a great deal of effort has gone into the restarting the upgrade of the Belfast Derry Railway. I have a letter here suggesting he's gone off to Europe looking for the money, which suggests that the money that might well have been in place last year when this contract was botched is not there anymore. So the sooner we get the Minister in front of us to find out what's in different money bags, not just the day-to-day stuff, it's extremely worrying.
David, you'd indicate it?
I wonder when we're just going to pull the shutters on this, Minister. I really just feel fed up. We come here every week. We're then told that officials are going to come. Clark's telling us that the Permanent Secretary is coming on the 25th. We're potentially looking at job losses in many of these things that our Minister's in control of. I've got to say, Chairman, he's not in control of anything, and that's the problem. He's leading us a merry dance, and he's leading the public a merry dance, and I think the sooner it's... There's no point in having a waffling session with him, because that's all it is. I think we should really be asking for hard, cold facts. Not this moaning and, you know, please, sir, can I have another bowl of soup? I think we need to be asking for, you know, hard facts. What money have you? How are you spending it? And when are you doing it? And we shouldn't be asking for it today. We should have been getting that some weeks ago. And I respect both you and the Vice Chair and what you're doing for the committee. But he's treating you with contempt if he's given you a 10-minute briefing and you're reporting back that you didn't really hear anything. So I really do think it's time for the committee to either pull the shutters down on him and, you know, let's wait. We might as well wait on the BBC. They seem to be the best communicator we have in this committee. They tell us all that's going on, rather than the department of the Minister. So I just would express a frustration of being totally fed up, but I really hate being treated this way, and my colleagues being treated this way on this committee. We're a very hard-working committee. We put a lot of effort into all that we do, and we care about the things. There are jobs at risk here. There are fares going up people know nothing about. There are services being reduced or taken away. And how do we hear? We hear from the BBC.
And I mean, I think that was the difficulty. I mean, I got very short notice yesterday, and I mean, I went basically as soon as I was asked to come down.
Surely, yes.
And I asked Gavin because Paul was at another meeting, so I asked Gavin to come with me. And I mean, I did press the Minister on a few areas that he talked about, but he couldn't give me any level of detail. So it was at best, it was a tokenism, but there was no level of detail. But I accept Chris's point. I mean, I don't think the Vice Chair.
Did you ask just yourself?
Well, I mean, certainly that's what I get an invitation to come down. So
Didn't even ask me.
But it was pretty useless because there's nothing even I can tell you today. There's probably more detail in the papers today, but certainly the Minister had the detail. He didn't give me a paper yesterday and I was there. I know Gavin took notes, but there was very little notes to take. But I take your point, David. I think
the other point I'd like to make is it makes this committee impotent. We cannot do our job with this Minister. Quite frankly, the sooner he goes, the better, as far as I'm concerned, because he's useless. But we've given him every chance, but we are ineffective. We can't do our jobs.
well,
We're getting papers late from his department nearly every time they want to come here. We're having to chase them for papers. We're fed up telling them off as well. So, I mean, the whole thing's out of control as far as I'm concerned with the department. And perhaps, if it goes on much longer, we might put our heads together and initiate an inquiry into the running of this department by the Permanent Secretary and by the Minister. Might be the only thing that would shake them up.
I mean, I don't know if that's something we can look at or not, but certainly in the short term, I think we should go ahead and try and seek a meeting in relation to the announcement in relation to this.
To the committee, absolutely, Chair. Yeah.
I mean, if that's something you want to bring forward later, David, there's no issue. I mean, I'm happy to put that to the floor, but sorry.
Chair, just as I agree with David McNary there on that, it seems to be, if it's not the BBC, you tend to read all of DRD's business in the Belfast Telegraph. It's not coming through this committee, and that's the way I would feel as well, and I would agree with David. I think we need to look at it seriously.
Yeah, if members contend, then we'll send an we'll ask them, well, not an invitation, we'll ask the Minister to come at the first available slot, and we'll make ourselves available for whenever that could be, if members are content.
Great.
Oh, sorry, just in the, just maybe in the back, what David said about reports and different papers, the latest situation regarding the committee's request for sight of the power report is that they've actually been refused. So can we put the question now that we go ahead and, sorry, the question's not. Has the Committee for Regional Development agreed that it is an exercise the power under Section 44 1 of the Northern Ireland Act 1998 to require the production of the power report and the right to the Speaker in those terms?
Yeah.
Okay. Agreed, then, members. I can also advise members the Committee continues to face difficulties in provision of papers from the Department and the fact that DRD appears to work in their own time frame as opposed to the agreed time frame decided by the Assembly section of OFMDFM. The latest example is today's papers, the briefing, the TransLink increase were only provided at 12:37 yesterday. Hence, the members are actually only getting these tabled today, so which again is not very good for us. And I know TransLink are here today, but it makes it much more difficult for us because we're only getting sight of the papers actually before the meeting starts, and we're getting no time to view those. So the Permanent Secretary is provisionally scheduled to come to the committee on the 25th of March. So members may wish, if they're content, to actually raise that. I'm sure that we'll raise that with the Permanent Secretary on that occasion. I'm sure I wouldn't need to ask him to do that.
When the Permanent Secretary is coming, perhaps we could raise another issue. Both on the board of Northern Ireland Water and TransLink, there's a underrepresentation of females. There's an underrepresentation of people with disability. It would be useful to find out if, in fact, they're using the office of the Commissioner for Public Funding, and how is it that there's such an imbalance in those two organisations, both under the remit of DRD.
Suppose, is the board for TransLink, is that not due to come to an end now in June? So maybe that would be a good time to actually write to the Minister and ask him, maybe has he any mind to, given the board's coming to an end at the end of June, has he in any mind to actually try and address that imbalance that's been referred to? Would that be in order?
Chairperson, you may remember in January the Commissioner for recommendations, none of them controversial, all of them very useful to enable a broader representation of people on the board. Now, it's my impression, and I've said it before, that there are serial appointees serving on multiple boards, and those people couldn't possibly have the time to address the issues which you and the parts themselves are faced with weekly. All of them are extremely well-paid. I think it's time to start making noise about the seriousness of ensuring that there's open and transparent appointment to these bodies, that they're not simply ones that are made by ministers or people who are circulating in the right social circles. That's my view on it. Questions asked about it.
Okay. Members, agenda item number 3 is the draft minutes, the meeting on the 25th of February. Can refer members to page 6 of their packs of the meeting on the 25th and ask members if they agree that they could approve these and sign. Okay. Agenda item number 4 is correspondence. Can refer members to page 12 in their pack, and unless there's any objections or issues to raise, we'll just go for the suggested to note approach. And maybe I can ask the clerk if he can speak to those. Do you want in first?
Chair, just declare an interest as former chair of the North West Region Cross-Border Group.
Item 1 is correspondence from the Department regarding objections to the 20 mile per hour pilot schemes. Item 2 is correspondence from the Department regarding Northern Ireland water crisis and the Red Cross in County Tyrone. And as the Chair has indicated, there's tabled correspondence from the Department regarding the summary of budget allocations for 2015 to 16. And there's tabled correspondence from the Department regarding the power review. And finally, there's correspondence from the department regarding the back at the scene of the traffic fatality at the Malone Road in Belfast.
Okay, are members content to note the items marked accordingly? And are members content to contact the committee staff if they wish to attend the launch at Mahara Community Garden and Allotment? Okay, okay. Agenda item number 5, a departmental briefing on financing of NI Water. Can I refer members to page 30 of their pack? Can I welcome Barbara and Grania?
Morning. Thank you, Chair.
So Barbara, I presume you have a presentation to make, so
Yes.
you can keep it reasonably
We will
brief.
keep it brief, Chair, because I think some of the areas we covered last time, whenever we were talking about...
And maybe I should apologise. I think it was the last day. I wasn't here last week, but I think the week before you were here, and we had to basically let you get away because we were overrun. So I apologise for that. It wasn't intentional, but
Thank you for that. Understood. The session ran...
yeah, the first session ran much longer than it should have. So
Perfect,
I
perfect.
apologise. The committee didn't do that intentionally on you.
Not at all. Not at all. Okay. This presentation is about financing Northern Ireland Water, and I suppose in many ways it's setting out the mechanics of how we get money to Northern Ireland Water, and also some of the reasons why some of the costs are included. If I just run through, I'll touch on the capital structure for the company, which is how the company was set up, the revenue sources for the company, capital funding, subsidy, which we covered extensively last time, PE budget, and I think Mr McNary had mentioned something about NI Water profits, so we've included something in that as well. When Northern Ireland Water was set up, all of the assets and liabilities that had been with DRD previously transferred to the company, but they were transferred at a reduced value. And slide 4 of the presentation sets out along the left-hand side how that value is reflected in the company's opening capital structure. The department actually holds £500 million in shares, so we have share certificates. We also have a £150 million loan certificate. That was the first loan that was drawn down on the subscription agreement. And as well as that, the company has statutory distributable reserves within its balance sheet, but that doesn't mean that they can use those for spending. It's the value of the company. The revenue sources which the company can draw on, because we don't have charges, it can draw on subsidy from DRD. It has non-domestic charges from non-domestic customers, which are set by the regulator. Then, also as part of the price control process, roads drainage figure is set by the regulator. To fund its capital programme, it can draw on loans from the department, and it also has its own charges for connection fees, any asset sales, and some developers' contributions. That would be whenever developers were, say, for example, developing new development. Those assets would eventually transfer to Northern Ireland Water, and they would become part of the company's assets and be reflected in the balance sheet. The next slide, slide 6, was covered extensively last time. It's how the price control works and basically sets out what goes into the costs when the regulator's developing those, and then what comes out, i.e. figures for the subsidy that the department will have to pay, the roads drainage charge, and then how much they can charge from non-domestic customers. NI Water's capital funding, it's set through the PC process, follows the social and environmental guidance, and also has made reference to the long-term water strategy, which we briefed you on at the last session we attended. The funding for NI Water's capital investment, the charges to non-domestic customers and the charges that are included in subsidy reflect an element of the use of the assets, and that would be a depreciation charge. And the main funding, apart from that, would be the loans that are issued from the department. When the company was set up on a commercial basis, it was provided with loan facilities, and this takes the form of a capital loan note instrument. Excuse me. That is a legal document set up between the department and the company, and it allowed the company to borrow up to 1.28 billion to fund its capital programme, and that was from 2007. That agreement has to be replaced by 2016. It was extended along with the last subsidy payment, so we're currently working on a redraft of that agreement to cover the PC21 period. It also has 20 million of working capital, so that would be the money that it could draw on if its cash levels were low. As a result of our loans, we are entitled to receive interest from the company, and interest is paid to the department on a 6-monthly basis. This year the company will pay about £45.3 million in interest, and the first element of loans right up until 2010 was at a fixed rate of about 5.25%. After that it's been set with reference to Treasury funding, and it's currently at around 3% interest for each loan. The non-domestic subsidy we covered extensively, or the non-budget subsidy we covered extensively last time around. To date, NI Water has received about 2.1 billion in subsidy. That would be since 2007 to the end of the current year. And last year the figure was 277.6 million, which included an amount for septic tank subsidy. Because we are the shareholder within NI Water, and slide 11 we touch on the dividend payment to the department, and this is a non-budget figure. But in return for our investment in the company, the department's entitled to receive some income on those shares. And for last year, that was 25 million. This has been ongoing. This amount is built into both non-domestic charges and into the subsidy level for domestic charges. The PE budget, we refer to the fact that because NI Water is not charging domestic customers, it's classified as a non-departmental public body, and for that reason it is reflected in the DRD figures. The slide 13 we included, I think it summarised some of the things that we presented to you last time around about how we convert the money that's in the price control process to PE treatment. I'll not go into detail on that, maybe members will have some questions there. We also included a slide at 14 which basically sets out how we manage the figure work so that we get down to the resource DEL cash requirements. And under 2014-15, the figure that was in the PC process, we couldn't fund, but we were funding to 99.2 million. For 2015-16, we included the PC15 figure, which the department had assessed as 113.9 million. NI Water's reported profits. The company has two sets of accounts. I'm sure it's reported that to you previously when it's attended the committee. It has statutory accounts and regulatory accounts, and we use the figure that's reported in the statutory accounts, and it was 153.3 million. And apologies, there's an error in the slide. The figure should be 129 million. That's reduced to once the dividend has been paid. Apart from that, the way that NI Water's accounts work, I talked earlier about developers' contributions, and developers' contributions are treated as a transfer of assets, and they're reflected in the balance sheet. I think Gwanda can confirm that.
And in income.
and in income. So we have about £60 million that's reflected, that is as a result of taking on those additional assets. NI Water works very hard, and the department has endeavoured to work closely with it. It actually doesn't carry large cash balances, and at the end of 2013-14, the figure was down to about 2.7 million. The company, whilst it has reserves, it can't incur any additional expenditure without having budgetary cover from the department. So any cash that the department has must be backed up, or that the company has must be backed up by PE cover from the department. Otherwise, the company can't spend. I think that's, well, very quick run through, Chair.
Thank you, Barbara. Just seeing your presentation there, you referred to there was an interest rate of 5.25% up to 2010. What's the current borrowing rate then?
Current borrowing rate's around about 3%. We refer to Treasury gilt, but the company still has to pay 5.25% on those original loans.
Up to when?
Up to 2027. That's whenever the agreement expires, and at that point the company will have to refinance or repay the loans, or there will have to be some other arrangement put in place.
And I'm just curious because, I mean, much we're talking about you borrowed there?
You can keep it right, but it's...
About 1.6 billion has been borrowed since 2007.
So why, given there's more, I'm just curious because it is such a large interest rate, why can that not be renegotiated now? Or re-borrowed and paid back?
Well, the company can only borrow from the department, and the department was committed to 5.25% because all of those loans were agreed.
You're committed to 5.25% until it's paid back. What I'm saying is, why could money not be re-borrowed and pay back their initial borrowings to save 2% on 1.6 billion?
Well, that was all negotiated with Treasury at the time. We would have to renegotiate that, and we did whenever we...
Would that not be prudent to renegotiate if you're going to drop a 1.6 billion debt by 2%?
Well, if we reduce the interest that's charged, we'll actually reduce the income that we receive on behalf of Northern Ireland Water, because the level of interest is actually built into the charges. But I understand your point, and certainly we will be taking this up with DFP. Again, we did take it up with them whenever we were extending the loan last 2 years ago.
In your presentation, you also referred to working capital facility. Can you tell me more about that?
Well, I suppose the working capital allows NI Water to use, if it's running low on cash and it wasn't due a subsidy payment, for example, it would use working capital first rather than trying to secure a capital loan, because the capital loan is long-term, whereas the working capital is a short-term loan, and they can repay that quite quickly once their cash situation improves, and it would be quite a low interest rate because it would be current interest rate.
Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Chair. You state that NIW was last valued in 2007, I think it was. Why have no further evaluations taken place?
Well, every year, NI Water revisits its asset value, and it's currently valued at round about 1.2 billion as a result of the investment that has taken place. That value was a write-down. It was a value that could be affordable, perhaps in terms of if you were looking at the level of income that the company could potentially recover. The charges to support that value would have to be passed on to customers, and that's what the dividend is and the interest on the loans. So that's why there was the write-down. NI Water, in its regulatory accounts, also makes reference to the full value of the assets, because the assets that were written down whenever the company was established are still available to the company. Things like Silent Valley and all of the other reservoirs, all of the treatment works that were in existence, the land bank that was in existence, they all transferred over, and there was no deterioration in the value of those. It was plain and simply to get a fair value determined for the company.
Okay, just one more quick question, Chair. You were saying some income on shares, approximately 20 million. How is that calculated?
It's calculated as part of the price control process. NI Water submits a rate of return on the share value to the regulator, and the regulator agrees that rate of return. So that's how it's actually built into the charges for customers.
Okay, thank you. John Dallett.
Chairperson, I'm struggling. I taught accounts to A-level all my working life, but this is just can't work this way. This company makes a profit, pays a dividend to the department. Yet there's 71 towns and villages across the north where there's no capacity for increased sewage. How do you work that out in fractions of fairness? Yes.
Well, I suppose, Mr. Dallett, and through the chair, the profit is an accounting profit. NI Water gets most of its money from the department, and it can only spend what we provide it with PE cover. So it can't, for example, like a company in GB, it can't increase its charges, recover more money, and then just set about a capital programme. We cannot allow NI Water to spend any more than we can provide it with PE cover for.
Chairperson, this is just monopoly money, make-believe, is it?
Right? Well, the company's held very tightly to account through the budget process. We monitor them on a monthly basis. The regulator looks at their plans, and all of the other stakeholders contribute to what the company's priorities are to determine their capital programme.
Okay, thanks. Connection fees is one of your sources of income. Who decides that? Is the regulator involved in that?
Connection fees would be included as part of the scheme of charges, which the company puts forward on an annual basis, and the regulator would approve those.
It seems to me that, Chairperson, and correct me if I'm outside the remit of this discussion, the connection fees are now reached a stage where, in fact, if you invested the money, you probably have, in effect, introduced water charges. I mean, there's up to £10,000 being charged on connection fees. Put that in the bank, take the interest on it, and you could pay a really modest water bill.
In relation to the householder?
Yeah.
Well,
I'm thinking in particular of young couples struggling, and really struggling, to get together a mortgage to build a house. First thing they're told is they've several £1,000s of connection fees, and I'm just wondering who's dictating those crazy connection fees that now exist?
Well, I know that the department that NI Water has scope for some assistance for first-time connections, but I do know that the costs for first-time connections, depending on the distance from the sewer, can be up to £80,000. Now, some people have chosen not to connect, and the department introduced the Borewells scheme to try and assist those. And I've just actually reviewed the report for the third-year operation of the Borewells scheme, and I know that quite a number of households have benefited from that for older properties.
Finally, is the department content that the board of NI is in control, and that they're not hiding away like they did during the recent water crisis?
Well, I know that
the control of these figures
Well, I know that the board, or representatives from the board, were up with the committee last week. Certainly, we meet with the board on a quarterly basis. The chair, the representatives from the non-execs and the finance director and the chief executive attend those meetings, and certainly we ask rigorous questions.
Sorry, Barbara. I know the chief executive draws that. I'm talking about the people who are representing the public. And is the department happy with a board that doesn't have a single female representative on it?
Well, through the chair, Sarah Venning is a member of the board, the chief executive, and is a female because it is a unified
Sarah Benny,
board.
sorry, chief executive.
Yes.
Right, stick to the board.
The department is reappointing the board of Northern Ireland Water. The advertisements will be out, I think, before either the end of this week or the beginning of next week. And one of the Minister's policy proposals in relation to that was to try and achieve greater diversity.
Do you know, has there been any engagement with the Commissioner for Public Appointments so that he can have his input and his 28 recommendations he made more than a year ago to try and remove this total embarrassment?
My colleagues in the Public Appointments Unit in the department have been working very closely with the Commissioner. We're hopeful that we will have a more balanced board, but it depends on who applies.
But Barbara, John taught A-level. I wasn't just as clever as that, but can I get back? This mathematical one's still catching in my mind here. Can you explain to me, so the 5.25%, who actually borrows the money?
Well, government borrows the money.
Government being the executive? Or?
Ultimately DFP, because we get our funding from DFP. So
DFP have borrowed at 5.25%, or have they passed it on to use at 5.25%?
No, it's NI Water pays 5%.
They pay 5%?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
To the
DFP?
department. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then...
At gross or net?
It's a flat 5.2% charge on loans drawn down up to 2010.
And is there no opportunity for you to renegotiate those with DFP?
We would have to go back to DFP. Say we did discuss this whenever we were seeking to extend the agreement.
How much is it costing you annually, Barbara?
Well, it costs Northern Ireland Water about 45 million in interest in total. That would be, we would need to look at separating out the costs for the period from 2007 to 2010, but we could write to the committee with the separation of those costs.
Yeah.
And could you, whenever you're writing to the committee, could you also inform us whether at any stage you've tried to renegotiate that, given that obviously interest rates are at least 2% less now?
Yes, we can pick up on that.
David?
Thank you. That very nice lady and your CEO, chairperson, board member was with us last week, and I hear what you're both saying about shortages of money, and it arose during last week's meeting in a discussion. And seeing you're the financial whiz kids, if you don't mind me putting it like that, that you had no accountancy methodology to retrieve money from private landowners paid out for repairing leaks. Can you tell me how much money is outstanding? How much money do you think is outstanding to the purse and to be collected for this work?
In relation to leaks on individual properties,
Private land, yeah.
I wouldn't have a figure for that.
Could you get that figure?
Well, I would have to go to Northern Ireland Water to get an estimate from them of that, but I could certainly do that.
It'd be very interesting, because the point I'm making is Northern Ireland Water or another Oliver Twist company, just like TransLink, we're going to get plenty of it this morning. And where people have financial difficulties, it does seem highly regular that there is work done and yet its money isn't being collected. So it would be very important just to see how much is outstanding, and we're very grateful. And I wonder, just on the same subject, Chairman, would the regulator know about this in terms of how the company is not functioning properly by not going after these debts?
Well, I know over the last number of years, NI Water has been turning its mind very substantially to recovering debt, and in fact the income figures have demonstrated that they have been going after bad debt coming from a range of sources.
Just on this particular issue, Barbara, if you know, and I don't expect you to have them with you this morning, right? But if you know what the income figures are, it would be very helpful to me and the committee if you could detail the income figures in collection and this particular matter, not just overall, but just for this particular matter, and therefore, as I said, the outstanding. And I wonder if you maybe would consider being able to think about whether the regulator should be asked to look at this.
We can talk to the regulator about it. As far as operational matters are concerned, they may not want to get involved in all of the detail, but we can certainly say that it's a matter that's concerning the committee and ask them for their view. I
understand that, and just finishing this, but you understand from our point of view, we represent the public out there. The public asks us questions. When questions arise, we do our best to find out answers. The public are not fools. And if I would be saying to them we need to do this, that and the other to help the finances of Northern Ireland Water through the department, which is our own money anyhow, but they're not doing much to actually retrieve debts, then the public would sort of say, well, what kind of operation is it? So perhaps under operational matters, the department might take a greater interest.
Well, I know from the meetings with the finance regulator, and I know that Ronan Larkin was with the committee last week, and they have taken tremendous efforts over the last few years in order to recover debt. And as I say, that has been demonstrated in improvements in the income stream from the company.
All right, thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, David. Chris, you were next.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for your presentation. I think there's a helpful level of detail there that we haven't seen in a while. What would be your overall assessment of the financial state of NI Water B?
Well, unlike your colleague, I have to say I am not a financial expert, and there are others within our department who are finance directors. But certainly from 2007, I've been involved with the company, and they have made tremendous efforts in terms of reducing their costs, and I think that's been demonstrated throughout the whole period and is evidenced in terms of their comparison in terms of efficiency with other GB water companies. As far as their funding is concerned, the constraints on the company as a result of the EE situation, so the fact that they have to be controlled in terms of how much they can spend to match what's in PE, doesn't make life easy for either the company or the department in trying to manage that, because we have to, particularly coming up to the end of a financial year, be very cautious in terms of any potential for overspend or underspend that NI Water may have, because that would be directly reflected in DRD's figures. So I suppose what I would say is, given all of the constraints under which the company operates, it has done a very good job in reducing its overall operating costs, in managing a significant capital programme, and in providing a good return to the department on its investment.
Okay, so in terms of reducing costs and increasing efficiencies, your assessment is that it's making progress?
It has made substantial progress.
The only other way it can hope to address some of the significant budgetary pressures that we've been advised that's on it then is in relation to raising revenue, one presumes. You touched on it there, but how much of a restraint is the executive and departmental decision to structure the company as what's been described as a private company operating under public sector rules actually having on its ability to do that?
Well, I suppose in preparation for the committee, we had looked at if NI Water was operating this year as it had in 2007, what the difference would have been. And it's quite tricky to try and work out all the different accounting treatments and what things have changed in the meantime. But suffice to say, the company, if it had been set up as originally envisaged and it wouldn't have had to split between its resource and capital, so it could have managed a budget to suit it. So, for example, if it was short on resource expenditure, it could have used the cash for resource and reduced its capital budget. So there are those kind of flexibilities that we just can't allow them because we, under the DEL budgeting arrangements, have a PE constraint for both resource and for capital. Outside of that, obviously, the money that the department has to provide to NI Water in terms of PE cover is money that is not available to other services, either wider in the department or within the wider public sector.
And that subsidy is around £300 million per year?
Close.
380, yeah.
Close to that.
Okay, and obviously that structure has dictated the level of interest rate that NI Water has had to pay?
Well, no. The original interest rate at 5.25% was set for the first 3 years of Northern Ireland Water's existence, and that was negotiated with Treasury in 2006-07. And at that time, and during its first year in operation, NI Water was treated as government-owned company and full-blown public corporation. So that fixed interest was attached to the government company.
Okay, and what is the potential impact of the Minister's announcement today? I think it was approximately £14 million pressure that NI Water were facing for budget 15-16. Has that pressure been met, or is there still risk to water provision and flood prevention and environmental protection in Northern Ireland?
Well, I know that the department has written to the committee. In terms of resource, NI Water has had a 10 million increase in budget. In terms of capital, the capital has been set at 140 million. The figure does not meet the full gap, as you've outlined. We have had discussions with the regulator, and we wrote to Northern Ireland Water yesterday to ask them to come forward with their annual operating plan and budget based on those figures. We believe that it has gone some way to alleviating the difficulties that they highlighted at draft budget stage.
But not totally.
It'll be up to them to come forward with their plan, and we'll be looking at that very closely.
Last question, Chair. How will that affect their negotiations with the utility regulator in terms of the price control then?
Well, the utility regulator, I've advised them of the figures, and they've agreed very closely with the work very closely with the department and other stakeholders to look at the outputs, and we'll be managing that very closely.
Time's against you, obviously.
Not much time to the new
is upon
financial
you, yeah.
year.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks, Chair.
Okay, no other members? Okay, thank you, Barbara and Grania.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, members, agenda item number 6. We're having a briefing now from the Consumer Council in relation to the TransLink fare increase. Refer members to page 49 of the pack and page 56 of their table papers. Okay, can I welcome Dawn and Scott.
Yeah.
Who's leading off? Who's leading off? Dawn, okay. Dawn, the floor is yours.
Right, okay, thank you very much. Good morning. Obviously, the Consumer Council is the passenger representative for Northern Ireland. We're committed to a transport system that is accessible, affordable and designed to meet the needs of all NI consumers. Normally, and ordinarily, we'd be involved in a corporate planning process which takes each year to review the fares for public transport, and there's an agreed protocol for covering this. The protocol itself is set out in paragraph 2.2 of your briefing, so I won't go through that in detail. But suffice to say, the intention is that it's there to provide assurance both to the Minister, to the committee, and more importantly to consumers that any fare changes are justified. For whatever reason, this protocol was not followed this year. Since then, it's not followed in the sense that we were notified on the 11th of December 2004 that the decision had been made to increase fares, and that decision was going to be made public that day. That was the first third of the decision. There had been no prior engagement with the Consumer Council before this time. Since then, there's been a number of developments. The Consumer Council met with DRD and with Translink on the 16th of December, and at that meeting, DRD outlined the financial factors influencing the reason for the fare increase. There was a meeting also on the 23rd of December, paper shared by Translink that outlined fare increases across various service types and ticket types. And then on the 19th of January, the Consumer Council met with the Minister. That was a very positive meeting, and he confirmed the Department's commitment to operating the protocol in future years, which is reassuring. At the meeting with DRD and Translink on the 16th of December, the Consumer Council was provided with a briefing paper from DRD that included reference to planning assumptions for DRD's funding for public transport in the year 2014-15, and that was the planning assumption would be a significant cut in funding, depending on the outcome of the January 2015 monitoring round. That these cuts would be confirmed once that monitoring round had been completed. Following that, we sought a number of sought clarity from DRD on a number of issues, including when the outcome of the January monitoring round would be known, and why the decision on the fare increases was taken before the outcome of that monitoring round was known. Would DRD itself fund anticipated pressures in relation to the concessionary fare scheme and other assumptions made in the briefing paper? And also whether any recommendations that have been emerging from a number of efficiency reviews to be aware of that have been taking place with Translink, have they been reflected in the fare increase fare proposals? We've not to date received a response on any of those questions. We also, on the briefing paper with Translink, received from Translink on the 23rd of December, we had a number of questions there. The key questions that we had were, was there an anticipated fall in passenger numbers as a result of the fare increase? That information has not been provided yet by Translink. We also asked how many passengers would be impacted by the above average fare increases, and we got a response to that, and those detailed in the briefing paper. Those are 20% of Ulster Bus passengers, almost 45, almost 50% of Metro passengers, and a third of NI Railway passengers were affected by above the average increases. We also asked how many passengers currently use better value smart fares, and Translink responded that this is around 30%, less than a third of fare-paying passengers across services. In terms of next steps, obviously we welcome the Department's commitment to adhere to the protocol in future years, and we're committed to working with them to ensure a fair and transparent process is followed when setting the level of fares that passengers are expected to pay. But we would like answers to our outstanding questions, and we continue to press the Department for those. The Consumer Council is committed to continue its work to promote best value fares, and we've been calling on Translink since the fare increase was announced to make sure that passengers are advised at every opportunity what the best value fares for their particular journey are. We believe it's the responsibility of all frontline Translink workers to make it clear to passengers whether they work in a depot, whether they're a ticket inspector on a train or a bus driver, that they inform passengers about the best value fares and help them to switch to those where that's possible. And we continue to press that case. So that's really an outline of our position, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Don. I have to say, I shouldn't say I'm encouraged, but I actually am encouraged that you haven't got a response, because I thought it was something personal between DRD and ourselves that didn't respond to our correspondence. So it must be an emerging theme from DRD that just don't respond to anyone. But just picking up on that point, when exactly did you say you had written to DRD that you haven't had a response?
We met with the department on the 16th. And on the 16th of December, and we followed up. It would have been late December, early January, which we've sent questions in seeking clarity on some of the issues that came out of the briefing paper, where we've gone back and asked further questions such as when will the outcome be known, what will the level of the reduction in funding be, what will the impact of that be when that's known, and in fairness, we've then switched our attention to, when we didn't get a response to that, we've switched our attention to questions to TransLink and promoting awareness of the fare increase coming in, because it was coming so soon into February.
But in relation to the questions, is it DRD or TransLink you're waiting on?
It's DRD, the department.
Sorry?
DRD, the department.
Can I ask when that was last communicated to them?
That will have been at the end of December. I think it was
End of December?
30th of December, the date that we sent the email across.
So 30th of December? Okay. So, Don, you were saying, and I'm not trying to, I'm picking your words because you said you were upbeat after that meeting, but are you still upbeat given that the department, on one hand, to make an announcement under the radar without consulting yourselves? I presume, yeah, their first the protocol is DRD and not TransLink.
DRD, yeah.
So DRD's protocol was to communicate with yourselves before there's a fare increase, and they didn't do that. But you were saying you're upbeat now that after that meeting you think you have that resolved, but subsequent to that then you actually write to them and don't respond.
No, I think we're updated in the sense that there's a commitment the Minister gave us in
just didn't tell you when that commitment happened. But
well, presumably there's hopefully this coming year. We're still trying to go over the rationale, understand the rationale for the fare increase this time round. We're hopeful that the protocol again for the next round of fare reviews.
You did say as well, Don, you talked about in your meeting they were giving you the rationale. Can you share that with us? Because I think as a committee, I don't know that we've actually got the rationale for the fare increase.
Oh no, we haven't got a rationale. We've been explained. We've been given various briefing papers and some of the sort of planning assumptions and around financial modelling. There are a number of questions that we have before we can say whether. So
there's no rationale up to date, like ourselves, for the reason of the fare increase.
Chair, if I may, I think the information that was shared with us did give a rationale. I think what Don's alluding to there is, once we've had that rationale, we've then gone back and sought further clarity, and it's that final clarity that we haven't had. The rationale that was given to us at the time is for the corporate planning process for 2014-15. It was anticipated that the company would make a loss, that TransLink would make a loss in the year 2014-15, but that would be covered by profits that had been made in previous years. That during the financial year 2014-15, that the size of that loss that was anticipated was actually going to be larger by the end of the financial year, and then coupled with the anticipation of there being a significant shortfall in funding for public transport in the 15-16 draft budget, those factors coupled together required there to be an action plan to address that gap in funding due to 14-15 and 15-16, and part of that action plan would need to be a phasing.
During discussions with the DRD, did they give in the indication to yourselves that there was actually two options on the table for a fare increase, an option A and an option B?
We were given an indication that there had been a range of discussions and that there was a specific option that the Minister had signed off on.
I mean, we've only got this table today, but it seems to be, I mean, rail was, option A was 4.5%, option B was 9%, bus was 5%, and option A 10%, and option B. So there was no detail on how they arrived at those figures with yourselves either?
No, as I say, what we were given a briefing paper that outlined certain assumptions that were being made, that these were various factors that were having to be dealt with, some of which had cropped up during the year 14-15, some of which were anticipated for the budget year 15-16. And the information that was shared with us basically said that there had been a range of options that were being discussed, but the option that was signed off by the Minister was the average fare increases that were then put into the campaign.
In relation to that conversation that you had with the Minister, was there any reasoning why it was signed off so quickly and at a particular time?
In the conversations that I've had with the department and with colleagues that attended the meeting with the Minister, I wasn't actually at the meeting myself, the rationale that was given was basically because of the significant nature of these financial pressures, was that a swift decision had to be made.
But and this is where I struggle, Scott, and I mean, I'm not picking you because it's obviously not your bailiwick, but if there was a swift, if it was necessary and it had to be swift, I suppose some of us would wonder why it happened in the midst of the Stormont House talks in December, but the fare increase doesn't actually happen until February.
What I would say, Chair, is we understand that there are financial pressures that were at play and that a swift decision was made. What we don't know is how long those financial pressures were known about, what discussions had taken place previous to this, and whether or not there had been sufficient opportunity to engage with stakeholders such as the committee, such as the Consumer Council, to be able to get a clearer view on what all of those factors were. So whilst I recognise that a decision was made swiftly, in terms of whether there was an opportunity before that for earlier engagement, I don't know.
Let's go to the floor, Deputy Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Dawn, you said at the outset your role was to represent passengers. Do you not believe that your role was undermined in this instance?
Well, we have. I mean, there is an agreed protocol in place to be able to do that. So, if we're not involved in the process, we can't passengers, and we've made it very clear in our discussions with DRD in our press statements that we cannot give an assurance to passengers that these fare increases were justified because we're just simply not involved in the process. We do welcome, though, the Minister's commitment that we will be involved in the future. They're trying to understand the unprecedented conditions why this was made so quickly without involvement. We haven't really got a proper answer.
How confident can we that the Minister's commitment he's going to carry through on it the next time? He didn't do it this time. How confident are you that he'll do it again?
He's told us face to face, so we have to take the.
Well, we
get it in writing.
We may think different. Just on another question, do you, in your own opinion, think that these were arbitrary and punitive increases?
That's the problem. We just don't know. If we had the information, we had the rationale, we had the detailed modelling, they express such an opinion. We just can't get assurance, and that's the difficult position we're.
Just a comment, Chair. I think it's a serious situation. Yeah.
Well, and I suppose as members will have their packs today as well. I mean, and I don't know if you're familiar, Dawn or Scott, this didn't actually start in December. This actually started in the summer of 14. So there has been a lot of preparatory work from the department prior to December. So it's the nature and how the whole process has been done. Nature and I mean, you have a very important role in terms of protecting the consumer, and you have been disregarded. And I mean, so in a sense, the consumer has been disregarded, and the representative body, being yourselves, has been disregarded, because this wasn't a case of someone sitting up late that night realising they had to raise additional revenue. This is something that's been worked on for some months, but is announced in mid-December. Formally put to the Minister on the 5th of December. And then a rushed announcement made in around the 16th, I think it was, 11th. So the process has been somewhat surprising for most of us. Are you finished, Deputy Chair?
Yeah.
Up next was John Dallett.
Thanks, Chairperson. I have to be very careful here not to shoot the messenger.
Yes.
Then are you the messenger? You will know that there was a great deal of debate and a great deal of struggle to protect the Consumer Council. The arguments we made was that your existence was absolutely critical in those areas that you speak up for the defenceless public. Now, you said this morning that you're upbeat. What prevented you from screaming from the rooftops when you, like us, woke up in the morning to discover this arbitrary decision taken? No consultation. Why had you not them in court that morning?
We have been, I think, very vociferous. And as soon as we found out about this, we were straight into the media. Know that this was happening. We were about the fare increases. We were doing media interviews, bringing it to everybody's attention that this was happening. As soon as we found out, the problem is this is a decision taken.
John, I know I spoke to your colleagues in the Consumer Council. I know they were as emotionally disturbed as I was. But in terms of action, what did you do or what could you do?
I think in terms of action, there are two steps that we've taken in relation to this particular issue. Is when the decision was announced, we've then, and we're continuing in this process at the moment. We obviously expressed our dissatisfaction with the way that the decision had been made. To some extent, that is that is out of our hands. We can't control when the decision has been made and made public in that way, but we expressed our frustrations publicly and stated that we were unable to give the reassurance to passengers that these fare increases were justified, that they were needed, or in fact that they were at the right level and would be the only ones implemented in the year 2015. So
it's really in your interest. I feel bad about this. I felt gutted for the Consumer Council that they were just steamrolled, rolled over, made irrelevant in the same way as this committee has made it irrelevant. But as an independent body, I expected a lot more from you.
I may respond to that, Mr Dallett. Our role is to represent the interests of passengers, and whilst we are still in the process of seeking clarity from the department with regards to some of the issues that we felt needed further discussion, we then also have a duty to the passenger. And we were of the view that the fare increase was announced, but it was announced at a higher level, and there wasn't sufficient detail in the public domain, in our view, for passengers to be aware of what was happening. So our efforts are very much concentrated in calling for further information for TransLink to provide clear, concise information for passengers on what the fare increase is going to be.
I don't want to repeat, but the announcement was made the 5th of December. You, in your own words, said this morning it took to the end of December before all started to roll in terms of asking questions.
We notified on the 11th of December that the decision was being made. We didn't hold the meeting until the 16th of December, where we were then provided with a document that outlined some of the rationale and the financial pressures that were influencing the need for this fare increase. And it was then on the 30th of December that we have then put in for questions in relation to further information. We've then received a briefing paper from TransLink outlining what the fare increases would be on the fare bands. And anybody that's familiar with the TransLink ticketing system will know that there are a myriad of ticketing options available to passengers, and it can be a very difficult system to navigate. When we ask the question, how many people are using these best value fares, these smart fares, that it's being said 30%. That exactly it's 30%. So the majority of passengers are still paying the cash fares. So there's our role to represent the interests of passengers. That there is a potential here that the majority of passengers can still save money, but the onus has to be on the transport provider. They have the power, they have the knowledge to actively switch people onto the better value products, and that's where our efforts have concentrated thus far.
Chairperson, and this is my final question. This is about a far bigger picture than that. This Assembly, for all its faults, invested millions and millions of pounds in new trains and new buses. And there was evidence that the public were coming out of their cars and were going on to public transport. There's also evidence that road safety have improved, and I suggest perhaps some of that is due to the fact that people got out of their cars and are not rushing and are using. Now, apart from the impact that these fare increases has on the individual passengers who may not be able to afford them, there's a bigger picture involving the environment and the millions, if not billions of pounds that went into that. Have you thought about what those fare increases might be if TransLink had to buy its own trains and buses? And does that not illustrate the disaster that's rushing down the track, so to speak?
I think the Consumer Council have endorsed the model of public transport that we have here. We value the public transport system that we have, the fact that we have an operator that can use its profitable services to cross-subsidise its less profitable services. And obviously we've been very concerned about the statements that have been made with regards to what could potentially happen to rural services and town services. And we've responded in kind to the draft budget consultation that took place at the time. So as an organisation, we do support the public transport system that we have here, and we have this shared goal that the department would have and that TransLink would have, would be to have an effective public transport system that meets the needs of passengers. That can only be done if the needs of passengers are considered and taken into account when services are being designed and fares are being set.
Perhaps my really only purpose in asking the questions is to encourage this Consumer Council to bare their teeth a bit more and to use their position to support this committee and support a great deal more people who are sick, fed up with arbitrary decisions being taken without any consultation, behind closed doors, and pushed out into the public. In this case, and I think you referred to as Chairperson, when the Stormont House talks were on and people's attention was diverted to other places. Thanks.
Just maybe something I missed when I was asked a question a few moments ago. That meeting you had with the Minister, did he give you a rationale why these were excluded?
Again, I believe the overall rationale was that a swift decision needed to be taken. And as I say, as an organisation, we accept that a swift decision was taken. But what I can't confirm is, well, what we don't know is how long these factors that necessitated a swift decision. We don't know how long those were. The department were aware of those pressing factors that meant a swift decision needed to be taken. So therefore, we don't know if the opportunity existed for us to have meaningful engagement.
That's the bit, Scott, I'm struggling with, because if it has been going on since summer, the Minister was aware from the 5th of December, the increases actually don't come to February. What made it so swift that they couldn't actually go into consultation with yourselves?
I think that's a question for the department.
Yeah, I think we will put that to the department. I think, David, you're next.
Yeah. I'm sure you'll agree that your consumers are our constituents, so we work together. There's a certain reliability, and I must say I have always and remain to support the work that the Council does. I think it's excellent, and as John Dallett said, a number of us, including me, certainly fought to ensure that your work could be continued. So the health warning is, don't let us down. With justification, as you referred to, you made your annoyance abundantly clear on the media as to how you felt badly about the way you were treated over this issue. Are you now no longer annoyed about the way you were treated and where this issue is going? Has that annoyance evaporated?
No, I don't think it is. I mean, we have to take the Minister at his word that there will be a proper process next time round. We have that assurance from him, and we have to expect that he will deliver that.
So your role is to ensure the consumer of the Minister's word? Is that what you're telling me?
No, not at all. And you'll have seen at our press work and our media work that we have been very vociferous in challenging these fare increases. The fact that we won't.
I understand that, but it's where we are now. The fact remains, despite all of this toing and froing, you didn't prevent the increases. What attempt did you make to prevent the increases?
It wasn't possible to prevent the increase in relation to the statutory remit that we have as an organisation. Our role is to represent the interests of consumers, and as part of the protocol, our specific role in the protocol is to represent what we believe are the consumer interests to the Minister before a final decision
after the
is
horse
taken.
is sort of bolted?
Well, that's what's not supposed to happen, unfortunately. That is what did happen on this date. Now, we haven't just simply said, OK.
I take your point. Have you been consulted by the department in respect of any proposals to cut back or cut out services? No. Do you expect to be consulted by the department?
Yes.
So where there has been in the media, even this morning, services are to be cut back, are you waiting on a call from them, or have you already made a call to them to say, hey, what's going on here?
Well, from my memory of events, it was this committee that questioned departmental officials on what proposals there were in relation to the draft budget when it was published. And it had then emerged from this, from that particular exercise, that there had been proposals for town services to potentially be cut or to be removed. In our response to the draft budget consultation, we expressed our concern in relation to.
Okay, I understand. I understand all that, but let's cut to the chase. What are you doing about preventing, in the name of the consumer, our constituents, these cutbacks to services?
The difficulty we have at the moment, which I'm sure is the difficulty that this committee also has, is that there isn't something there to campaign against. What we are seeing at the moment is we know that the fare increases come in. We know that there are efficiencies being sought within what has been reported as TransLink management costs, and we know that it has been speculated that there will be a number of services reduced or
Speculation's
removed.
pretty good. You know, the jungle drums are pretty good in Northern Ireland. They're usually right. Would you give the committee assurance that after this meeting you are going to address the speculation and find out, is there any truth on behalf of the consumers of Northern Ireland that there are going to be cutbacks in the services provided by TransLink?
By all means, we can engage with, and we do engage on a regular basis with the department and with TransLink.
Okay, well, I'm grateful for that.
Can I skip on? Also, one of our priorities for next year going forward in our business plan is looking at the impacts of cuts, because we know public sector cuts are coming and all sorts of services, not just affecting consumers across the board. And that's one of our priorities for next year, is monitoring the impact of cuts and represent the views.
I thank you for that, but you'll appreciate that the trick is actually trying to know what this minister is going to announce. You haven't a clue what he's going to announce in advance because he doesn't tell you. So it's quite clear that the matter that I've related to you about cuts will affect the consumer. It's also bound to affect the workforce, who are consumers also. So that's why I've asked and made that request to you. You said in your briefing to us that you believe it should be everybody's job in TransLink to ensure that passengers are given the best value ticket for their journey. Related to the discussion that we've just had, do you expect fare increases of this magnitude to be an annual event?
Again, we don't know, because our understanding of the corporate planning process is essentially the department decides on the budget allocation for TransLink. It notifies TransLink of what that budget allocation is likely to be. It gets a briefing from TransLink to say, well, if that's the level of funding that we're going to receive, these are the options available to us. And in some years, that has meant there has been a fares freeze or no fare increase, and in other years, it's meant that a fare increase has been...
Let me just say, if I may, and without offending anybody in the beautiful area of Strangford, which I represent, if I could speak for them, could I ask you that you would ensure on their behalf that these fare increases are not going to be an annual event? Is that not part of your remit, to ensure that there are no further increases, or do you just follow and make an argument afterwards? What I'm looking for you to do is to make representation before.
And the purpose of the protocol is to give us the opportunity to be able to make those representations.
But have you lost confidence in the protocol?
The protocol didn't. The protocol is fine.
Have you lost confidence in the working of the protocol?
What it requires is adherence to that protocol, and we can play our part in that process. We need the other party.
You're sounding more like a civil servant that sits here rather than somebody who's meant to be working for the consumers, and I'm very disappointed in all this dodging of answers. I just want straight answers. That's basically what I want. We hear from TransLink that it surveys, of the public, probably similar to yours. Don't know where you get the same answers, but their surveys show high ratings in terms of prices and comfort and times being met. And we hear from the department all the time that this TransLink's a wonderful company. Given that it's all we have at the moment, and importantly, it has an admirable workforce, we must be working under pretty undesirable restraints and conditions. Can you tell the committee what improvements you are looking for on behalf of the consumers regarding to TransLink service as it stands now in Northern Ireland?
We are always looking for a continued focus on customer service for passengers and for overall service delivery. We are heavily involved. The figures that you mentioned there in relation to consumers' views of value for money and punctuality and reliability, they're monitored on a 6-monthly basis as part of the passenger charter process. And we sit on that process. In fact, we asked for the questions that are asked of passengers to be changed significantly so that passengers' views on a range of services could be asked, because your journey with TransLink doesn't begin when you sit on the bus or when you sit on the train. It's when you try and access the information to plan your journey. It's when you engage with staff in the contact centre or in the bus station or the train station to get information on what the best ticket is available for you. So we continually work with TransLink to highlight to them what we think needs to be happening to improve services for passengers, and we'll continue to do that.
I understand that, but I didn't actually get an answer. Maybe you might put it in writing to us. Could you tell us what improvements? Not all this chit-chat and this, we meet with TransLink and we meet with the department, we'll have nice wee cosy chats. Just would like to know what improvements would the Consumer Council like to see related to TransLink as from today, taking into account the potential that bus routes are going to be cut and slashed and these fare increases, and there will be no more fare increases. I think that would be helpful to me anyhow.
I'd be happy to come back to the department, produce a briefing paper on what the...
Just don't go back to the department, come to this committee.
Sorry, come back to the committee, that's what I meant, I do apologise. Okay. I'd be happy to come back to this committee with a briefing paper which outlines what our key policy positions are for the development of public transport, what specific requests that have been made, and where we stand in terms of seeking commitment to targets for customer service and customer satisfaction.
I think that would be very helpful.
Okay, thank you, David. Alex, you were next then, Chris.
The increase in fares, that is about 4%. Sounds about that, isn't it?
It's, I think, 5.3% across Metro, 4% across Ulster Bus, and 4.5% across NIR.
With what you know, do you believe that to be fair?
With what we can't give an answer to that question because
lack of information.
Basically, yeah. Going back to points made previously, we know that the increase was due to what was a perceived loss in 14-15. We don't know what that actual loss is now materialised to because it was linked to the outcome of the January monitoring round. We know that it was part of a plan due to a reduction in funding in the 15-16 draft budget. We know additional funds have been made available in relation to town services, so we don't know how that's reduced there. And additionally, we also know there have been a series of efficiency reports and reviews that the committee will be aware of. There was the PEDU review that was announced by the Minister in 2012. There is a TAS report, Transport Advisory Service report, that has been mentioned in evidence sessions given to the committee. We don't know what recommendations have come out of those processes. We don't know whether those recommendations have been accepted by the department. We don't know if they've been embedded in the cost-saving plan, which included the fare increase. That was then presented by TransLink to the department. So without all of that information, it's not possible to say, yes, this was the only option available, or in fact, this was the best option available.
In light of this lack of information, is this the first time you've experienced this lack of information coming down to you, or has this been a regular occurrence over the years?
There have been challenges in the past to be able to get information or to get it in a timely fashion, and that's one of the reasons why the protocol was put in place. So as both organisations could have a clear understanding of who would be involved, when we would be involved, when it would be appropriate for the information to be given to the Consumer Council. And there have been challenges getting that information in the past. There have also been occasions where it has worked very well. We haven't always agreed with the final outcome as to what's happened, but we have received extensive information and been happy with how we've been engaged with during that process. Unfortunately, it didn't work on this occasion.
So the current protocols about getting information from the department to use at the moment, would you say the department have reneged on the protocols that they've agreed with you?
In our view, the protocol wasn't adhered to on this occasion.
Right, okay. With these fare increases, are you able to anticipate how many passengers may not decide to use TransLink or services as a result of this?
No, that's something that should be part of the scenario planning for TransLink. We have asked for that information, and what we've been given is headline percentage figures and estimates of what the actual figure might be. We have gone back and specifically said, don't give us percentage figures, give us the actual information, tell us passenger numbers, tell us how much, you give us the figures that you're working from, so as we're both on the same page, and it's that level of information that hasn't been provided.
Are you surprised this decision went ahead before the outcome of the last month?
That's one of the questions that we've asked. Why was the decision taken before
That's quite
the outcome
unusual.
of the monitoring round?
Do you agree with that?
Well, we don't know. What we found unusual was that there was a significant planning assumption being made on what was going to happen in the January monitoring round. And our first two questions were, when will the outcome of the monitoring round be known? And why was the decision taken before the outcome?
Basically, everything's a bit of a shambles until you get your information.
We can't give
from DRD.
We can't answer a number of the questions that are coming to us from this committee in terms of, was the fare increase justified? Was it at the right level? Until we get that information from the department.
So if you get that information, hopefully sometime in the next year, if not sooner, what can you do or not do about it? if you find the fare increases is not fair?
The opportunity has gone, the decision's in. The purpose of the protocol is for us to be able to say, you've given us this information, however, these are the concerns we have on behalf of the passenger, and these are the steps that we think need to be taken. The fare increase has been decided upon, it's been implemented, it's in the Wayfare machines, and passengers are paying it right now, and that's why our focus now is on getting people from the cash fares onto the best value fares. It is a significant difference. As I looked at this before coming to the committee today, 4 service, the 4 Metro service, runs past the front gates of Stormont here. If you get that at Ulster Hospital in Dundonald and travel into town, cash fare will cost you £2, and we know that that's the fare that the majority of passengers are paying. So that will cost you £2. 5 journeys is going to cost you £10. A SmartLink fare will be £1.25. So 5 journeys on exactly the same journey using a SmartLink card will be £6.25. So there's a saving of £3.75. 10 journeys in a week, that's a saving of £7.50. 40 journeys in a month will cost you £80 in cash, only £50 using a SmartLink card for exactly the same journey. So people could be saving significant amounts of money, but the problem is
not been sold.
Well, you've got cash fares, you've got day tickets, you've got weekly tickets, you've got monthly tickets, you've got SmartLink fares, you've got iLink fares, you've got Daylink fares, and there are good information sources out there. If you know enough to go onto the website, to check the What Ticket Finder service, to call the contact centre and say, I'm travelling this often, these are the services that I'm using, these are the multimodal journeys that I need to make. And that's why we're saying the onus has to be on TransLink, because it has the products, it has the power to be able to save more people significant amounts of money. And the onus can't be on the passenger to find their way through all those options.
So when somebody's going to the ticket desk, they should be getting offered that deal?
The majority of people we know are buying cash fares. That's what TransLink have told us. You can't buy a cash fare from a machine or over the website. You have to engage with a person, whether it's the bus driver, the train conductor, the kiosk staff. So it should be part of the culture of the organisation to have that customer focus, to say, where are you travelling to today? How often do you travel? Here's some information on how you could potentially save money. There will always be people that say, no thanks, I don't want to know that. But if the majority of your passengers are still paying premium fares when they could be paying better value fares, which in addition will have cost savings for the organisation as well, then there needs to be a concerted effort from the organisation to give its best value to its passengers.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Just before I call Chris in, I mean, on that point you're making, Scott, of course, the sceptics in you could suggest that they would actually lose an awful lot of revenue by trying to convert people to the cheaper options. So that's why they don't actually want to convert people. Yes, there may be cost for them to administer it, but obviously the revenue will drop dramatically as well. So they're
The TransLink's passenger charter, which is its commitment to its passengers, has a specific commitment in there to say, we expect this of our staff. And one of the commitment is
and to be fair,
give you the cheapest ticket.
And to be fair, they're doing that with 30% of the people. So, I mean, they could say they're meeting their charter because they are actually converting 30%. But if they convert it 100% of the people to reduce fares, then the amount of money they're going to bring in is less, and they're going to have to increase the fares again. So it's a chicken and egg, this one, a bit.
I think that may well be the case, but obviously from a Consumer Council point of view, our interest is to represent the interests of passengers.
And we understand that. The difficulty I'm actually hearing today, and this is where I'm a bit disappointed, that you can shout, you can stand on top of this building and scream if you like, but nobody's listening. You've no teeth. And I mean, I don't mean that to be disrespectful to yourselves. You've been treated with entire contempt by the department. This process has been running since somewhere last year. The best you get was a meeting on the 16th of December. You write to them on the 30th, they don't respond. But what happens? Nothing. They just treat you with contempt. And that's actually unfortunate because, I mean, personally, from my perspective, I see the Consumer Council having an important role and being a strong advocate for the consumer. But if they've been disregarded by the Minister, then, and have no form of recourse against the Minister, then they're toothless. You know,
Can I just have a question on that point. Scott, I was in South Africa on Christmas. You can't get on the train bus. It's an integrated ticket system. And people from 10 to 90, you can't get on the system unless you have a card. So, you know, we're way behind at times, and I call that a third world country. And
there is a project ongoing that the Consumer Council have been involved in with TransLink on the integrated ticketing project or product that is to come in. And we worked with the researchers that were involved in that project to put forward what are the key needs of passengers, what is it that they want. And it is desired that the ticketing product will have the science behind it, so as when you tap onto the service, when you get your ticket, it will calculate the best value ticket, which is great. But we're some distance from that, and the Consumer Council maintains the position that there are better value products there available, and it's certainly our role as the passenger representative to try and increase as much awareness of those tickets as possible.
Chris, you were next. Sorry.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, thank you for accepting the request to take the briefing on these issues today, because I think access to affordable public transport is probably one of the most important issues across the department and this committee, and certainly for our constituents. It's been a really useful presentation to hear from Consumer Council today. You've had a robust set of questions, but in fairness, you're asking questions of the department that I think seeking answers to. The challenge applies equally to this committee as well, and we need to work with you to ensure we get access to that information, most notably perhaps in relation to the performance reviews and the Transport Advisory Service information, January monitoring round outcome. I think it would be useful perhaps to hear back from you further to getting access to some of that information, because the point of the protocol, the point of consulting with yourselves is ultimately to get your view in relation to the fare increases in order to best for us to understand where they sit in terms of what's in the best interests of passengers. So I also think it would be useful, Chair, to regularise hearing from you in relation to that 6-monthly public transport review as well. I think it's an issue we need to get much more closer attached to. I don't know when the committee last conducted an inquiry into public transport or an inquiry into ticketing systems, but I think it might be useful for us to get much more attached to this issue in order to ensure that we have the system that we're all working towards.
Okay. I mean, and maybe we could consider that a future meeting. I suppose when the Chris meeting and release an inquiry, but that would only be really around fares and stuff, Chris.
Yeah, I think there's a clear challenge here, obviously, to communicate to the public the options that are available. I think the Consumer Council have set out the potential savings from smart ticketing versus cash ticketing in stark contrast. So, whilst there are robust questions to be asked here today, there is a challenge for all of us to work together to ensure that gets communicated and to ensure that we get the best public transport system possible.
Well, if we can ask the staff members just to do a bit of background research first, and then we'll see if we can bring forward something in terms of the forward work programme. Cathal, you were next.
Thanks, Chair. I don't want to rehash anything else is said, but I'll just take maybe a wee bit back by the assertion earlier that Scott has said about that there isn't something to campaign against. As it would be my assertion, it's been kept in the dark and not having enough information, something to campaign against. To be trying to make a glove out of a thimbleful of cloth is something to campaign against, and to be actually presented as some of this stuff as a fait accompli is something to campaign against. The whole discussion around fare increases will be academic if we see a reduced service provision, particularly in the rural areas, and that's what I'm hearing from constituents, and also increased restricted timings. You can't get out of Derry after 10 at night, you can't get into Derry before 9 in the morning. And the other thing I'm hearing, I was at a wake last night listening to 2 bus drivers, they were talking the real fear about potential staff reductions. So all this stuff is all connected, and if we're working with no information, there's nothing we can do about it. The Consumer Council can do about it, but that's where we should be starting.
So really what you're saying here, Scott, is we need to hear you shouting more rather than shouting after the event. We need to get someone shouting, because there is information, and I mean, someone's already alluded to, I think it was David, talked about the town services where it was prized out of the officials, and they had a list of areas that they were considering. Now, eventually they did supply us that, so the information's already getting out there, and I mean, really, for you to, we really want to see you getting your teeth into this and calling it as it is, and calling the Minister and his department what it is as well, because they're failing the consumer. And I mean, if you want to be the advocate, then you need to raise your voice. Stephen, you were next.
Thank you, Chair, and I apologise for my lateness. Can I ask, has your organisation raised with TransLink the issue of carnet ticketing, where people can buy a book of 10 or 40 tickets, regular users, because this happens in many other parts of the United Kingdom. And if they're regular users, say if the train from Portadown to Belfast buys a monthly ticket, and then they're off ill or on holidays for a week out of that month, they've lost any advantage they have. Now, I have raised this time and time again with TransLink, and I haven't had any concrete answers in relation to it. But can I ask, has your organisation raised this with them? Because at best, TransLink in relation to this issue have been unimaginative.
I think the product that you're talking about there, there is that's the issue that you're raising relates solely to train travel. So of the bus tickets, if you buy a SmartLink card, a SmartLink product, and you load 40 journeys onto that product, then you're right. If you buy a weekly ticket or a monthly ticket, and you don't use that now, we did question that with TransLink some time ago, I'll confess, and I'd have to go back and look up the answer. I think the answer that we got related to the anticipated level of revenue that was coming through, but it's a question I'm happy to go back and revisit with TransLink.
Yeah, I would appreciate if you would. I mean, more and more people are using the trains to commute on a regular basis, and if it's going to be financially advantageous, and they're buying a monthly ticket, you know, they want to be able to avail of the discount and have some degree of flexibility. So I'd appreciate it if you would do that.
Okay. I think that's all the members have finished. Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Dawn and Scott, and look forward to working with you. I mean, this isn't a criticism of yourselves. So, given you are treated with the same level of contempt as this committee, we should get stronger together rather than weaker. So, but look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, members, going now to agenda item number 7. Can refer members to page 52 of their pack and 63 of their table papers. Can I welcome Kieran Dornan, David Strahan and Kieran Dornan.
Could I apologise? David must have been delayed at a previous engagement, so we will
be on the bus.
Kick off. Well, I got here by bus perfect on time, so can't be the bus.
He's sitting outside.
Is he? Fair enough, here he is.
Okay, thank you, David. Nice to see you again. I presume you maybe a short presentation first, and
yes,
we'll open it to the floor then, if that's
yes, Chair. I'll be very brief.
You will know, just before you did come in now, we had the Consumer Council, and obviously that topic will be similar to yours in relation to the fare increases, and as maybe we'll cross over those two issues, that may be touched on as well. So some of the issues around that may cut across this one as well. So.
Yeah, so just to be clear in terms of the representative, so I'm Chief Executive of TransLink, Ian Rogan's the Marketing Executive of TransLink, and Kieran Dorn's an official from the department.
Yeah, Chair, if I should say, I think the department sent down a paper last night setting out some briefing prior to the hearing. That was essentially produced by the department, so answering any questions, I certainly will be referring to that.
Well, can you take back the department from this committee again, our disappointment, given that this was tabled for today, and to send papers late last night or late yesterday afternoon or whatever it may have been, for members only to receive them today, to have an opportunity to ask questions around that paper is highly disappointing. And I do note you were in the public gallery before this, Kieran, and you'll note that, and maybe you could chase the department, Consumer Council waiting in response since the 30th of December. So it's interesting that we're not the only ones treated with contempt. The Consumer Council, who is the advocate for the consumer out there, has the same level of contempt from DRD. So there needs to be something really done to try and get this communication flow and information flowing much better than it is. And I mean, I want to say it again, I'm really disappointed today that we're coming and we're getting a paper just as we come into this room today round areas of this briefing that we're having today. It's highly disappointing, and it's definitely not the way that this committee is going to continue business. Something has to be done. And I want you to take that back in the strongest terms, because it's not acceptable, and it's not the way the business is going to continue in this committee. If the department can't give us the papers, then the department may as well not come.
Sure. Look, I certainly will take that criticism back to the department. The only point I would make is the department was working up to yesterday on its budget settlement, essentially, and how that would be broken down across different parts of the department. And that had some influence on the papers. So I'm not trying to make that as an excuse, but just to set some context.
They haven't told us about that yet either.
Yeah, we only got that late yesterday afternoon as well.
The news.
If I could also say, in relation to the Consumer Council, I think the Minister has already made it clear that in relation to the protocol, which we accept does exist, that it hasn't worked as it should have done this year.
No, it's not that it didn't work. The DRD ignored it. The workings of this, I mean, sorry, David, we're getting into an area before you do your presentation. The workings of the protocol is there and clear to read and clear to understand for everyone. This particular piece of work was being worked up from the summer of 14. And information went to the Minister in December the 5th, and the Minister makes an announcement on December the 11th. Now, there's more than ample time, there was no urgency, and this was done in the back of a draft budget out for consultation and no outcome. So how the department could be convinced or otherwise that the full requirement of whatever they're proposing as a fare increase was necessary or otherwise, that just doesn't wash, Kieran. Just doesn't wash. Now, to make excuses that it just didn't work on this occasion, it didn't work because DRD didn't want it to work. There was more than ample time for the communication with the Consumer Council and indeed communication with this committee. This committee has a role to scrutinise the work of DRD, and we're being ignored continually. And it has to stop. It absolutely has to stop.
Look, Chair, I certainly will take that point back. If I could make a couple of points about the consultation with the Consumer Council following up on the issues.
Chairman, if I may interrupt.
That's okay.
Could we be in charge of this meeting?
Yeah.
And could I ask the question that this is a joint presentation, is what it says on the agenda?
Well,
Just for me, is there a briefing paper from TransLink? Is there a paper to follow from TransLink?
You just stole my thunder, because David's here, and I'm going to allow David to do the presentation first. Then we'll come back to your point, Kieran. Okay. It's only because Kieran introduced those first other issues I want to address them first. David's here representing the panel. He's going to make a briefing. I don't know if we've been supplied a paper in relation to that or not. But it is a joint briefing between DRD and TransLink. So let's let David bring forward his...
Just for my own, in case I'm stupid, can be at times, the only briefing paper I have is from the department. Yeah. So there's no briefing paper to follow from TransLink.
No, I presume it's a joint paper, but I presume David's going to make an oral presentation, and we'll have an opportunity to ask questions after that. So, Kieran, we can come back to your point after we get this presentation. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Chair. And as I said at the start, I'll make my comments as brief as possible. Welcome opportunity to be here, to be accountable to the committee, answer your questions. I think before I mention too much on the specifics of the fare increase, I just would like to make the general point that the scale of the funding reductions that TransLink faces, both this year and next year, mean that TransLink cannot continue without taking significant significant action. TransLink continues on the path it's currently on without taking action. TransLink, in a period of time, will not exist. Such are the scale of the funding reductions we face. And that's the context with respect to the fare increase. To touch then on the fare increase, our fares increased by 4.6% on the 16th of February, as you're aware, which was the first fare increase in almost 3 years, following a period when our fares were frozen. Since 2011, our fares have increased by an average of 7%, and over the same period in Great Britain, fares have increased by around 19%, and in the South by up to 40%. So while any increase is unwelcome news, compared to the increases that have been faced in Great Britain and in the South, our fare increases are significantly lower. There are ways that we can save money. We would encourage our passengers to avoid paying more by moving from cash fares onto SmartLink cards on buses and buying rail tickets using M-Link. And they can do that, and they can avoid an increase, and they can actually save money by paying by those methods. The reason for the increase, as I've mentioned at the start, our funding has been reduced this year, and we're facing a significant reduction next year. And as I've said, continuing as we are without action is not sustainable and will not lead to a sustainable business. There always will be a debate, I accept, around the level of fare increases and weighed with that any possible service impact, and that's a matter for the department in terms of where that balance will actually ultimately fall. We will sustain losses this year and next year of around 25 million. We've previously announced a move in terms of our management overhead and administration costs to reduce those by around 2.1 million in order to help meet the funding gap. The increase in fares that we've already and the fourth item, which will help meet the gap, is a review and an optimisation of our services. It's been mentioned in the past, and my final point, Chair, before I finish, in respect of the cost of fuel. Just to be clear, TransLink will benefit from the falling cost of fuel. However, there's a time lag in terms of when that takes effect, as we hedge fuel prices around 12 to 18 months in advance. That's something that, as far as I'm aware, all transport companies do. And so as the cost of fuel falls, then we lock in that price for the future. Now, that's all I'd wish to say at this point. Happy to take any questions.
Either of the Kieran's want to add to that as well?
Chair, all I can really say is that in essence, David had summarised the essence of the argument that was brought to the department about the need for a fare increase. And the only other point I would make is that it was actually not until towards the end of November that actual case had materialised. In relation to January monitoring, it's an absolute fact that TransLink's budget this year has been cut by 10.3 million. I was surprised that the Consumer Council were not aware of that. All I can say in relation to the contact with the Consumer Council is I was at the meeting with the Minister and the Acting Chief Executive of the Consumer Council on the 19th of January, and I genuinely am not aware that they raised any specific issues of a lack of detail. In essence, the paper that was prepared for the Consumer Council meeting on the 16th of December is in large part the same paper that you're looking at. From the department's point of view, that is a rationale. It does explain the need for a fare. Like in summary, the way I would describe it is TransLink's budget has been cut by 10 million in this financial year and will be cut by approximately 13 million next financial year. And what has essentially been produced for us by TransLink is a set of proposals which we believe are balanced, which look at the need to both generate income and reduce costs. And at the same time, we have taken account of the level of reserves, cash balances and so on built into TransLink's plans, and we believe that the position as it's agreed is a reasonable approach. Obviously, the Minister, if I can speak on behalf of the Minister, nobody wants to see fares increase, but picking up on the point that David made, from the department's point of view, the customer over the last couple of years has benefited from a position where essentially fares have not increased, and even after this increase, our position on this is, whilst it's regrettable, fare levels in Northern Ireland are, compare very well with the position in Great Britain and the Republic of Ireland. And that, in summary, is all I would really want to add.
Just near our point, fare increases in comparison to the rest of the UK and the Republic of Ireland, do the operators in the UK get their buses subsidised, or do they buy them themselves?
If you're talking about private bus operators, the local authorities in England would not generally purchase buses for private bus operators.
Unlike here?
Well, the difference is that TransLink is a public corporation, but the other point I would make is...
but it may be a public corporation, but that would also... I mean, you would wonder how some of these other operators, given that they don't get the funding, level of funding TransLink does from a government body, actually can hold their fares without the same level of increase.
Why could they receive funding in different ways?
Let me finish, Kieran. And then, I mean, I'm quite happy you can speak all day if you want. So, the point I was making is that if the operators in England have to buy their own buses and can manage without a fare increase, then why is the same given? Why do we need an increase in Northern Ireland given the buses are basically purchased by the government?
Well, Chair, as I understand it, and I wouldn't sort of portray myself as an expert in the area, but private bus operators will add the depreciation charge relating to the purchase of those buses onto the costs, which are then subsidised by the local authorities. The difference here in Northern Ireland is we pay, if we have bought a bus on behalf of TransLink or paid for that bus, then TransLink does not charge us the costs of the purchase of the bus in its subsidy arrangements with us, and that's the only difference.
In GB, the situation would be, firstly, there are funding streams from the public sector, such as the Bus Services Operating Grant, the BSOG, which isn't applicable here. And secondly, it would be the case in GB that private operators would have a ring-fenced commercial network, and anything on top of that is contracted and funded directly by local authorities and by local government, and that's a funding stream which DRD wouldn't give to us. So when they provide, DRD provides us with capital for funding buses. That basically the quid pro quo is GB. The local authorities provide revenue funding for non-commercial services, whereas we're expected to cross-subsidise non-commercial services.
Kieran, come back. Kieran Doran, you said something about the case materialised in November in relation to the fare increase. Why then were you working on it from the summer?
Sure, without overcomplicating or trying to get into a massive amount of detail, essentially we do agree a financial plan with TransLink on a rolling basis. And the plan for the current financial year, 2014-15, had been agreed well over a year ago. And essentially that was based on certain assumptions about the fact that fares would not increase, but also was based on the assumption of a level of funding to be provided by the department during 2014-15. Now, during the course of the year, at various monitoring rounds, it became clear within the department that the level of funding that maybe we started the year assuming in relation to in-year bids was going to be too optimistic, and we had to adjust to that position. That was actually known well before Christmas, and I think I haven't been personally involved, but I do believe that the committee has been briefed in some detail on the monitoring rounds that have taken place through the year. And essentially, the position in TransLink did change very drastically. We started the year assuming that there would be no cuts in TransLink's budget. By the end of December, we were working to an assumption that we were going to cut its in-year funding in rail subsidy and fuel duty rebate by over £10 million. That was an exceptional circumstance in our view, and it did require measures to be taken quite urgently. We were also aware by that stage that the budget for the following year, for the year we're just about to go into, was also going to be extremely difficult. And we know now that although concessionary fares, we have received some additional funding for concessionary fares, other revenue subsidies for TransLink will actually be cut by 13 million. And, you know, a fare increase at the level that we are talking about, it's our understanding, maybe David or Kieran can confirm this, will only generate income on current assumptions of about £4 million. But TransLink is being faced with a cut of 10 million this year and 13 million next year. And in essence, that is the rationale. And we believe we have explained that position very clearly to the Consumer Council. And if there is outstanding issues from the Consumer Council point of view, we're happy to try and address those. All I can say is I sat through the meeting with the Acting Chief Executive of the Consumer Council on the 19th of January, and I'm not aware that those issues were raised directly. Now, I'm not suggesting that we have addressed absolutely everything, but that in essence is our position as a department.
So let's go back to the fare increase again. I mean, because I'm really confused with this one, because and we all know the financial position, and we know that there's pressures not only in TransLink but within every department. You make a judgment. You come up with two options in December, an option A and an option B, on the basis of a draft budget that hadn't been agreed. We should be thankful you went for option A, because obviously option B was much worse than option A. But how did you arrive at those figures, Kieran? Given that, first of all, it was a draft budget and nothing was agreed, and if you're only trying to you're raising, in your words, only $4 million, the other one was obviously double that, because it was double the increase. I presume mathematically it'll be double what you would have received. Where did those figures, or how did you work those up?
Well, sure, in essence, and you know, David and Kieran can maybe come in on this. There was a case put to the department by TransLink in relation to not just fares, but a series of measures to put in place essentially a financial plan for the year we're just about to go into.
When did that happen?
As I said earlier, it happened essentially mid to late November. And
why then did the protocol not work? Given that, I mean, earlier you said it had to be done quite quickly. Why did the protocol not work then?
Look, Chair, we have made it clear that I'm
trying to establish why it didn't work.
Well, essentially, an announcement was made around fares, and the judgment made within the department was there was an urgency to make that announcement.
No, Kieran, this work's been going on for some time. Someone come up with two different options. So there's been an awful lot of work done, and how much this is going to realise. The announcement wasn't made, the paper didn't go to the Minister until the 5th of December. The announcement was made on the 11th of December. So I'm trying to figure in my mind, months before this, there was work done and how much this was going to realise. And what I can't understand is I would like you to convince me why the Consumer Council was left out.
Sure, all I can say is that, you know, the work that you're referring to previously, months ago, last summer, was actually in a completely different context. It was not in a context. At that point in time, like if I refer you to the paper that we've sent, essentially what we were talking about was a position where TransLink would break even over a period of 3 financial years, ending in the current year, 2014-15. That was the basis of the agreement that we talked about last summer. At that point, there was an indication that fares may increase from January, the January that we've just passed, but not at the level that has subsequently turned out to be the case. What subsequently happened was the level of in-year funding provided by the department was drastically cut in year, and that required the plan to be adjusted. But that plan wasn't adjusted until towards the end of November, and that's the factual position from my point of view.
David.
Thank you. You're very, very welcome, and appreciate you being here. No surprise, I would say that TransLink's dilemmas seem to be never-ending. We seem to spend, maybe that's why we're here, to spend most of our time talking about TransLink. It's a bit worrying and scary to read in the department's written draft today, Kieran, of staff reductions which are printed could be 150 people costing 10 million in redundancies. Are these public sector workers or private sector workers?
Well, they're employees of TransLink.
I'm asking you a question. Are the public sector workers or the private sector workers?
I would consider them public sector workers in the sense that...
so if they're public sector workers, are they caught up then in the departments and the executive's cull of public sector workers? Is that how you're getting rid of them?
Well, I can't comment on the exact arrangement within TransLink, their employer, but my understanding...
Your department has put down in black and white 150 people facing redundancies, and they're going to cost 10 million. That's why I'm asking you, the public or private? If they're public, are they caught up in the cull that the executive are doing with public sector workers? Or are there different reasons?
The quoted numbers from the Department of Finance and Personnel about the numbers of civil servants, they're not included in that number, but they will be, hopefully, if the scheme, as I understand it, in TransLink runs on a voluntary basis. The cost of that will be something that we will consider bidding.
Let me just ask a question then that the public will ask probably. If they're public sector workers, as you say, why then would executive money be used to pay for the redundancies? That's what this briefing says.
Because
it's in the costing, it's in the needs section.
Well, I think the actual position is that the department has put a case to the Department of Finance and Personnel who are looking after the scheme.
Well, that's why I'm asking. That's why I'm asking the question. Why would the public out there be expected to have their money used to pay £10 million for these redundancies? Can we see the case that's being made to the Department of Finance? Can you provide the committee with it?
Well, I can't personally. It will be a scheme that will be run by TransLink.
Could the department provide it?
We can certainly provide information, Ms McNary, in relation to the scheme as it develops.
Oh, no, wait a minute. In here it says that a case has been made, or is being made, to the DFP, right, for the provision of £10 million for redundancies, right? If that case is being made, it seems highly likely that 150 people are going to lose their jobs, which is why the case is being made. So all I want, and I think the committee it would be fair for the committee to see what is the case. That's all I'm asking, and maybe you would consider that if you can't answer me. In this briefing, this paper again, which I'm relying on, okay, because very little's been said from the front table, the department are flagging up, their words, potential major liquidity risks. Are we facing a trading crisis with this company? And are there discussions about major liquidity risks taking place with the unions?
Well, I can't answer the second question. That wouldn't be something.
Do you not sit on the round table or is it somebody who works for you and reports to you with TransLink when all these decisions are taken? Did you not tell us that the department had a significant insight as to all that went on in this company, and that a departmental person sits at the table when executive decisions are being discussed and being taken?
Generally, I'm not sure what the question is.
Well, the question comes back, if you or somebody else from the department is sitting around this, surely they would know our discussions underway with the unions about this very, very serious aspect, 150 people probably losing their jobs, but more than that, the frightening aspect of the company facing liquidity risks. Are they liquid or not?
If I could, from the department's point of view, if I could try to answer the question about the liquidity risks, what we're trying to point out in the paper is that under a particular scenario for next year, we would accept that there are serious issues, financial issues for TransLink to address. It's our understanding is that after the fare increase, after the series of measures that David referred to earlier, TransLink is still projecting a significant loss next year. On top of that, we have to factor in the possibility of a degree to which TransLink will have to assist in taking forward its capital programme, and potentially, depending on the success of a voluntary redundancy scheme, set aside some funding for the cost of that. In that context, then we would accept that TransLink will face significant liquidity issues by the end of the year, and that reinforces the point that measures have to be taken now, whether it's on the income side or the cost side, to address those.
I can see that. I mean,
that's what we're saying.
It sounds like a soap opera. I'm not sure if it's EastEnders or Coronation Street, but in the real world, the potential of 150 people losing their job, the public paying 10 million to a company that's is having liquidity difficulties. You used the word, we're looking at a scenario. Is it possible that the committee could have an insight as to what your scenario is? Because it's not in this briefing paper.
Well, with respect, Mr. McDarry, I think it is, and we'd be happy to set it out in more detail for the committee if that would be helpful.
You talked about its losses. The number of times you've sat there and been very helpful to us, as you are this morning, may I add. The matter of the imperative of TransLink to break even was never distant from any conversations we had. In other words, if this company fails to do it, it shouldn't be in business. Now, it seems the company is running on a tank of concession fares in terms of what this briefing is, and it seems to me to be highly irregular and potentially illegal in allowing a company, in terms of the law and company law, to trade at a loss, let alone defy the imperative that the department have put on the company. And the fact is that the returns from concessionary fares are propping up this company but the fact is also, and maybe you might look at it or correct me now, that a subsidy cannot be used in audited accounts and returns to disguise the difficulties that a company's in. So, what's the relevance? This company's in serious trouble. It's not allowed to trade, right? It's not allowed to trade at a loss. It has to break even. Now, even in the wildest aspect of the workforce, support that's come from this committee and this assembly and the executive for this company, and even allowing my scepticism that I don't think this company's fit for purpose, I don't think it should be in business, and I think it's running itself into the ground. will you agree with me that the company's trading at a loss?
Well, I am certainly agreeing that it is running a loss this year and is projected to run a loss next year. I wouldn't agree that it is not complying with company law or meeting its legal or regularity requirements.
And you're positive on that?
I'm pretty sure, yes.
So, in fact, what you're saying is that subsidies are part of the income of this company, and that is how it is trading.
Subsidies provided or grants provided by the department is something that is provided to TransLink.
It's very hypothetical, but you painted us a scenario. I paint you a scenario that what if, and personally I wouldn't want to see it happen, but what if the finances of this executive were so dire that it could no longer make subsidies to this company? What are the chances of this company surviving?
Well, with respect, Mr. McNary, we're not too far off that position as we stand going into next year. There will be no bus revenue subsidy provided to TransLink. There will still be a subsidy for rail services, and the only other significant level of revenue support well, it's not a subsidy, it's a reimbursement of the concessionary fare scheme.
I must say, Kieran,
that is the factual position.
I must say, Kieran, and you've been at this table many times before, the Chairman would permit me, you're scaring the hell out of me in terms of a delivery of a transport system to a public which requires it. And what I need to know now is the department working on a rescue?
No, the department, but what I can say is the department recognises that we're in a very serious position, and that reinforces the rationale for immediate action around income generation and cost reduction. And we believe that the package of measures which are set out in the paper, which were essentially proposed by TransLink in discussion with the department, are a balanced first step, and it will be an ongoing process. And for example, in relation to bus services frequency, TransLink is about to engage on a consultation process locally to genuinely engage with the general public at local level, to streamline its services, but with the ultimate objective of becoming more cost effective.
I accept that. And just finally, Chairman, if I may, I think what I'm hearing is that the rescue of a company that is in the red, seriously in financial trouble, without subsidies, is reliant on fare increases which came to us unannounced, redundancies of which we're told they are going to be 150, and cuts to services of which we're not just too sure. Now, in many ways that may be acceptable, but I don't think what will be acceptable, and where we'll be looking for assurances from the company and the department, is that what you're doing now is not to be repeated, in that this is a rescue, and that you're not going to have fare increases announced, in my terms, under the table, and that's maybe a bit unfair, but announced next year, that there's not going to be more men and women. I mean, there's no apprentices even of hardly any numbers coming into this company. So you're not going to have, you're going to pay off people, and we're going to maybe have more services cut, particularly in rural areas. Is that going to happen next year when this company is still in a red position? Because I think what we need to know is, no, it's not, but when are they going to be in the black?
Well, I don't know if David wants to comment, but what I can say is that TransLink's plan is certainly based on the idea it is an extremely challenging year next year, and hopes that the measures that it puts into effect next year will eventually bring it back into a more balanced financial position. But I certainly accept that there will be some very difficult decisions to be made on the basis of the level of funding that we can provide TransLink for next year, and I'm not trying to avoid that.
Your minister's on this morning saying he needs 60 million. I'm not too sure. My constituency and many constituencies of the members sitting around here depend a lot on buses. We don't want the buses going over roads with potholes. So we're in a catch-22 situation. I seriously have great doubts about this company and always have had. But in terms of it is there now, and we can do all that we can to rescue it, I still think you need to bring more to this table to get that support, not only for the public but for the workforce and for those who care about a transport system. And I hope that could be as forthcoming as quickly as possible.
Kieran, just take you back to the fare increase and maybe following on from David's, because David's point about the liquidity of the firm. What about the second fare increase that you're considering?
Well, the minister, and the minister has made it clear. Essentially, TransLink put forward a proposal which suggested there might be an argument for a second fare increase, which would have increased that average up to 10% over the course of the year. The minister made it clear that he would only accept the argument for essentially a fare increase of averaging about 5%. And obviously that was well above inflation, and we accept that point. But that was on the basis of the arguments that were being put at the time. That's really all I can tell you, Chair, in terms of what the option A and the option B. That essentially was what was being discussed at that time towards the end of November, and it was set out in the paper provided to the Consumer Council. And the minister basically essentially said that it really should only be at the level of 5%. And
so are you telling me, Kieran, there's going to be no more fare increases in the next 12 months?
Sure, I can't give a commitment like that.
But you're telling us the minister disregarded it. I mean, it has to be signed off the minister. So if the minister disregarded it in December, surely you could give us, this committee, an assurance that there will be no more fare increases.
What I can say is that and I'm not trying to avoid the question, and what I'm trying to say is that on the current planning scenarios, we are not assuming a further fare increase this year.
Yeah. Well then, this year, then why? I mean, we have a response from the department in January, and I'll just read you a section of it. TransLink plans to recover from its loss-making trend through a combination of income generating and cost reduction. Now, for income generation, there's only one thing I can assume you can do, and that would be to increase fares. So this comes after the sneaky announcement in December. We get another response in January to say that it recover from its loss-making trend through a combination of income-generating and cost reduction measures, including the reductions in non-frontline staff and internal organisations, fare increases and service charges. What does that mean then, Kieran, if that doesn't mean an actual increase in fares?
I'm not 100% sure. What it basically means is that the package of measures will obviously include a fare increase.
So you're now not ruling out there will be one within the next 12 months, given that was in a response from the department in January.
What I said, Chair, was that on our current planning assumptions, and which depend on partly on what TransLink bring forward to us, we're not assuming a further fare increase this year. The next discussion about the future financial plan has yet to happen. In relation to the other measures we're talking about, TransLink have indicated that they expect to save something in the region of 2.1 million in efficiency measures this year, and potentially save 5 million as a result of rationalisation, or if that's not the proper word, looking at a more efficient way of looking at bus services and on the railways. That's the position as it stands at this point in time.
David, you've got off lightly here. Maybe could you give us any insight in terms of fare increases over the next 12 months?
In terms of the proposal we put forward to the department, we, in the early days of my appointment, it became clear to me that we required to put TransLink on a sustainable footing, and I proposed a range of measures. One was a reduction in management costs, one was a fare increase, service optimisation. In respect of the fare increase, which is the one you're highlighting, we proposed in November a fare increase which was ultimately approved by the Minister, and we also at that time were asked to consider what we would be proposing in the context of further cuts to our budget in the 15-16 year. And that was the context that we made the proposal that, yes, we've made a detailed proposal in respect of a fare increase of around 6%, but if we're facing major cuts in this year we're about to enter, in our view, that fares need to increase by a higher amount, and that's where the 10% came. Now, that ultimately wasn't approved by the Minister. However, we are still in the same position today broadly as we were then, and the other measures of the plan that we are taking forward. So in respect of the management cuts, we're on with progressing those and taking cost out of the business, and in terms of the service optimisation, consulting in the near future. So personally, I can't give any guarantee in respect of further fare increases. However, in my view, there's a balance to be struck and a consideration to be made whenever the Department and the Minister are ultimately considering there's a balance to be struck, in my view, between increasing fares and cutting services. Because the position, and to return to my opening comments, the position that we face, if we do not take action, TransLink is not a sustainable organisation, and it will not be here in the future. So that's why, and no one wants to see a fare increase. That's not why I joined TransLink. No one wants to see anyone lose their job. That's not why I joined TransLink. However, the result of the funding reductions we're facing is we have to take action. And ultimately it will be for the Minister to decide where it falls in terms of fare increase vis-à-vis service optimisation.
Okay. Just maybe, and I mean, you know that we've laboured on the Consumer Council on the fact that they weren't consulted, and I mean, we appreciate that that's the responsibility of DRD, but whenever you were in consultation with the department, were you aware that the protocol hadn't been followed?
I recall the submission we made to the department. I think we highlighted in that submission the fact that there was a consultation process to be had with the Consumer Council and the committee, and we flagged that up. But we flagged up, you know, that's to be led by the department. That's not our responsibility.
But when did you flag that up to the department?
I think that was on the 4th of November. Election.
4th of November. Or maybe just for clarity, do you want to just check that date and even write to us, David? Maybe just to make sure, because
no,
it's something.
I'm happy it's the 4th of November.
4th of November. Okay. Chris, you were looking at a little one in there. I mean, you're not next, but if you're wanting in that.
No, I have a couple of questions, Chair.
Okay,
so
Cahill's next.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, gentlemen, there this morning. Given that the Minister there this morning on the BBC committed himself to the protection of TransLink from budgetary reductions, your earlier statement there, David, that you believed without all this raft of cuts here, including again to what the BBC talks about up to 200 jobs there, that TransLink will cease to exist? Will the current TransLink accounts then confirm, is TransLink now, or when will it cease to be a going concern?
If I may, and I don't mean to be picky, but I don't think I use the term cease to exist. I think
I'll get it if you check it.
Okay. So let me restate, hopefully clarify the point. My point is, if TransLink cannot continue on the path it's on without taking significant action, or ultimately it will not exist in its present form. So at some point, I believe the imperative, public transport is essential to the lives of so many people. The imperative will always be to have a public transport company. However, if we don't take radical action now, the company will not continue as a going concern. In terms of your question as when, in respect of this year's annual accounts, we expect that in our annual report there will be significant additional disclosures around the going concern status of the company. The company is still a going concern, but if we don't take action now, at some point, in my view, in the next 2 to 3 years, TransLink will be flagged up as having going concern issues.
But I don't want to be pedantic, David, interference to the translation of what, but we are looking at conversation around the 20 rural towns, rural services, the reduced train and bus and metro provision, all the rest of it. Just give me your translation then of services optimisation.
So what we have sought to do in the context of the budget cuts that we're facing, the fare increase that's been approved, we have sought then to review our services and look at the lesser used services. In the context that we are now receiving no further funding, or we're not receiving funding at the moment for bus services. So we're looking essentially at the services which are not profit making, or that cost. The net cost is a cost of money to provide. So those are the services that we will be seeking to consult on in the next number of days and weeks. And then once that consultation process runs its course, then we will obviously take into account the comments and the feedback in the consultation. And then ultimately there will be a decision need to be made in respect of what services, if any, then are affected.
And when will you reach that economy of scale, and what will that look like to my constituents on the ground and other constituent members here?
Well, that's what we're going to consultation in the next number of days. That consultation is complete in terms of being ready to go out, but certainly we will be writing to local MLAs in respect of what that means for their area.
Could I add there as well that as part of the budget process, the department has received some additional funding to support town services. My understanding is that the plan essentially would be that those town services will be retained, but essentially what we're talking about is the retention of the bus network, but looking at the frequency of services in a range of areas. And I don't mean to be cutting across, but it's an important point that I make on behalf of the department as well.
Worth saying what we're doing in the consultation, as David had said, we have we can identify what are lesser used services. That's not to say those are the ones which are necessarily cut. What we do is we go out to every area, including, for example, your area, Cal. We people the services that we are reviewing. We try to gauge usage patterns. We try to gauge, do people rely on them for specific reasons, other alternatives that people can take. So that if we do make alterations to the network, we try and ensure as far as possible that people have alternatives for their particular journeys. The consultation itself will be done through our website. We'll be writing to every MLA, every local authority. We'll have direct engagement sessions in each of our bus depots. And for things like the metro service in Belfast and the railway services, it's much easier to identify users directly on board buses and trains. So the consultation exercise will be extensive and meaningful.
And we're not just going to see top slicing?
No. No, we want to retain the geographical extent of the network, and we want to ensure as far as possible that anyone using our services, if we're changing services, do have an alternative.
Can I also add, Chair, that I think the Department has made it clear that they do expect TransLink to consult in detail, but at local level as well, you know, with local...
Sorry, repeat that again. Consult?
Well, to certainly engage in a genuine consultation at local
And is DRD going to encourage that?
Yes, and we will be expecting to see evidence that it has taken place.
That follows me on nicely then, Kieran. Because, I mean, it's just, the cogs are turning very slowly in here. David said that TransLink flagged it up to the department on the 4th of November in relation to the Consumer Council. And now you're very keen to consult. Why then, on the 4th of November, when it was flagged up to you, because I'm sure you could forget, and it was taken to the Minister on the 5th of December, and an announcement made on the 11th of December, why did you not adhere to the consultation process?
Sure, look, all I can read...
The expediency of this, every time we hear more, it just diminishes. We're now talking about 4 to 5 weeks.
Consumer Council.
Yeah. Well, on this committee would be nice as well.
Look, if I could point out a couple of facts, because I've been dealing with TransLink for long enough to actually to know when the protocol was drawn up, who wrote it, and exactly what it says.
I'm not bothered all about that. I'm bothered at the timeline here and commitments that your department have had with the Consumer Council, and to be honest, you should have a commitment with this committee.
Yeah.
Now, you could forget, and we could forgive someone for overlooking something, but TransLink brought it to your attention on the 4th of November. Why then, given the Minister didn't get sight of it until the 5th of December, why was that process not followed?
All I can say is that...
Was it deliberate?
All I can say is...
Was it deliberate?
All I can say
No, was it deliberate?
You mean in terms of...
To ignore the Consumer Council in this committee?
No, I think...
Was the timing deliberate because of the talks going on in Stormont House?
Sure, all
He's trying to hide bad news.
Not sure is...
Because you're not answering any of my questions, I'm going to ask you different ways.
No, I appreciate what you're doing, but if I could take a bit of time just to talk about the protocol. The protocol is actually a three-way agreement between TransLink, the Department and the Consumer Council. I fully accept the Department's responsibility to talk to the Consumer Council prior to the announcement. It didn't happen this time, and it should have done. We have made that point clear.
But we don't know why you haven't done it. That's what we're trying to establish here, Kieran, why you ignored the protocol.
I can only tell you what actually has happened.
We know what's happened. We know there's been a fare increase that came out amidst the Stormont talks whenever the media was more interested in other news. We know all that. What we're trying to establish is who made the decision to deliberately ignore the Consumer Council in this committee.
Sure, look, I'm not trying to avoid answering your question. All I can say is that we contacted the Consumer Council and the committee on the afternoon of the press release issue.
Well, that's not actually true. No, sorry. The Consumer Council notified this committee. The department the department. But let's put the record straight. Yeah. The department never communicated. We got notification from the Consumer Council.
Okay, well, I wasn't aware of that.
So it's not the BBC tells us things, it's actually the Consumer Council.
Yeah, the point taken, all I can say is that we tried to rectify the situation as quickly as we could by arranging a meeting the following week with the Consumer Council. And if we have omitted any request or ignored any request from the Consumer Council, I hold my hands up on that, but I generally am not aware of the requests that are being talked about. What I can say is that the Minister subsequently spoke to the Consumer Council on, I think, the 19th of January at Chief Executive level. Now, I'm not trying to excuse what happened. All I can tell you is that is what actually, from the Department's point of view, took place.
Okay, members, I have to leave the room momentarily, so if the clerk can maybe nominate, given that the Vice Chair is not here.
I don't nominate the members.
Sorry, if you
members will
could look after the process, sorry.
Yeah, if members could nominate a chairperson.
Do you want to do it? I nominate Cal.
Members content?
Yeah.
That's all right.
Let me ask the next question now.
That's all right. Thank you, Chris. Sorry, Chris, Alex was in front either.
That's all right, I'm only joking.
Thanks for voting for me, anyway.
In terms of reduction in staff, it mentions that that won't affect frontline staff. Is that correct?
In respect of the reductions, the part that will not impact frontline service, 2.1 million that we earmarked for management overhead and administration costs. So that 2.1 million will impact on frontline services. The wider consultation we've been speaking about that's about to go out in the near future will impact frontline services, and those jobs are linked to those services. So there is we're very clear here that the proposal will impact frontline services.
So say if a bus driver wants to go and puts in you're not stopping them around.
In terms of voluntary exit, yes, we hope to run this by a voluntary exit scheme.
In terms of services, are you saying there won't be a reduction in services in town centres for bus?
So the additional funding that was provided from the final budget has acted to, if you like, save services.
Right across Northern Ireland? The whole.
However, those town services, while there still will be a town service, the frequency of those are under review as part of this process.
So every service will be available, but you mightn't run as much. Is that fair to say?
The service in the towns that were earmarked will be
that Bangor?
Possibly,
Oh, politics is local there, Alex. Thanks.
Yeah, is Bangor included in that?
I think it's basically the list that was provided to the committee, the list.
So Bangor is on it.
Yeah.
So. Okay. Alex, can I just, John, you want to get away? You have another meeting.
Chairperson, apologies, I'm 20 minutes late for another meeting. Many more train crashes are coming down the line, and this is deviating slightly. Have you got the money for the upgrade of the Belfast area railway?
The capital budget for next year, as agreed, does incorporate phase 2 of Derry Coleraine, and if you know, you will be aware that there's a procurement process going on.
I do.
Subject to that economic appraisal being approved and a successful tender process, the department has built the grant into the budget for next year.
Well then, can you explain why the Minister in a letter to me on the 26th of February said you're preparing an application for European funding to pay for it?
They're not mutually exclusive. If we provide grant in the budget and we subsequently put forward an EU application and are successful, that will basically allow us to reduce the amount of grant that's required for next year, which will free up capital for other projects.
Tell me it is ring-fenced.
For next year, within the budget.
Phase 2 of the capital project.
Subject to the economic appraisal being approved and the procurement process.
Thanks, Chairperson.
Thanks, John. Again, I was fairly keen on finding out whether or not the phase 2, the money is there regardless of the occasion. Alex, were you finished there?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Sorry, Chris, eventually.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Chair, I thought I was requesting a briefing today that would basically put forward the rationale for the fare increases, and that thankfully is part of what we've received, a very detailed rationale for the fare increases. But in addition to that, we've received a paper that effectively highlights the complete inadequacy of the Northern Ireland Executive budget process and a complete lack of openness and transparency from the Department for Regional Development in relation to some really serious issues. The paper, as has been said, identifies a real risk to the liquidity, some have said existence, of TransLink, even after the fares increase that has been introduced has been factored in. So why did we not receive this level of information during the budgetary process or in December when you say most of this information was already available?
Well, all I can say is that I haven't been personally involved in the briefing of the committee around the budget, but I think the department would take the view that we have tried to signal that there are very serious, and there has been, it's been clear for some time there are some serious budgetary issues to be addressed within the department, not just in TransLink, in Northern Ireland Water and in Transport NI. And I understand that there's been some communication with the committee last night. I appreciate it's not directly to do with this briefing, but there has been an offer made for senior officials from the department to come along and explain in more detail to the committee the implications. But the draft budget consultation did signal that there were very serious issues here in relation to public transport, Northern Ireland Water. And at the end of the day, the Minister has made it clear that from our point of view as a department, we're facing a £60 million problem as we go into next year. TransLink's share of that, in essence, is 13 million. But there's significant problems elsewhere as well. So that's all I can really say.
Chair, with respect, I think the Assembly Committee for Regional Development deserves much more than signals in relation to issues of this seriousness. There is helpful detail in this paper today that you said was available in December, and we received no level of detail of the sort.
I take your point, and all I can say is that I can only discuss the public transport side, and the budget for TransLink was under discussion up until very recently, and it's difficult for me to use a final position prior to that happening.
Okay. Well, let's look at some of the detail very quickly. And this is only the lack of openness is only emphasised by the public statement made by the Minister today, which again made no reference to the committee in advance. Anyway, some members have touched on it already, but so there are some key areas of reduction proposed. Efficiency staff reductions of 2.1 million in 2015 to 16, which could increase to 4.2 million in 2016-17, targeting non-frontline staff. Can I just ask you again to be clear about what exactly that means and who exactly that is likely to include?
So that is the management overhead and administration costs in our organisation. So it's essentially supervisory and manager levels.
So how many potential? So you're saying there are potential job losses for managers and supervisors? Yes. And do you have any? Can you indicate how many that's likely to be?
Well, we're working that through, and I'm very conscious in all of this that we're dealing with
people,
of individuals and people. So we're working that through with the individuals concerned, and I'm reluctant to outline today to the committee the number. I can indicate that around 12 managerial positions have already gone, and that's resulted savings of around £500,000.
Fairness, we need to be sensitive there because there are people out there.
Point well made, and that's why I'm asking. It's people's livelihoods that are at stake here. The service reorganisation or service optimisation, saving of around 5 million. It says Ulster Bus Town services will not be stopped in low-use areas due to increased funding. They're it's unavoidable to not address the reports today that it's being reported that 20 bus services will be stopped can you give us more idea in terms of what is meant by service reorganisation and perhaps respond directly to that report that 20 bus services are to go?
I haven't seen, genuinely have not seen the report today on the 20 bus services, but I know pre-Christmas there was a report around a dozen towns which there was extensive coverage in respect of the town service in those towns ceasing. So what this is indicating is that the service in those towns will be retained. However, we are reviewing the frequency of those services, and that's what will go to consultation in the next number of days and weeks.
Okay. Can I welcome the reassurances that you've given in relation to consultation, in relation to any reorganisations? I have positive experience of TransLink in my own constituency of East Belfast, in a particular area of East Belfast where Residents Forum was established and services were reorganised for the better, increased accessibility in line with common sense approach to what residents' needs were. So I hope that that type of positive experience is possible even in this very serious context. The other key reduction I've mentioned then is obviously overall job staff reductions could be in the order of 150. Overall redundancy costs could be 10 million. Can you just confirm again whether that will be voluntary or compulsory, and if it's voluntary, how exactly you intend to manage that process?
The process will be a voluntary process, and we hope to be able to achieve those efficiencies through a voluntary exit scheme. Again, that will follow the consultation process in terms of the services that we've identified. So, if you like, bullet points 2 and 3 in the paper you have are very closely linked. So the service reorganisation in bullet point 2 and the jobs in bullet point 3 are linked, and one is the outcome of the other. And obviously then there will be a consultation process and a scheme operated and communicated to staff, which will allow them to volunteer if they wish to exit.
Okay. I think it would be irresponsible of committee members not to acknowledge the fact that there are quite serious executive budgetary reductions impacting on a lot of these issues, and indeed the Northern Ireland Executive takes decision in relation to budgetary matters at times without having to address revenue raising or generating income balanced with reducing costs. So I accept there's some difficult situations you find yourself in. In addition to these measures put forward today, are there any other specific actions that you think are needed or that you would recommend to try and ensure that TransLink and public transport provision in Northern Ireland is put on a more sustainable footing?
Well, to my mind, and I don't wish to take up time, there are 4 areas, and I'll touch on them very briefly. 4 areas, in my mind, are 1, funding losses out of reserve. We're doing that this year and next year. We are providing a bus service today that we're not paid to provide, and that's being funded out of our reserves that we've built up in the past. That's not a sustainable option for the long term. The second is driving down the management overhead of our organisation, so making our management more efficient, and I proposed 2.1 million, which I believe is a challenging target for us to achieve. And then the last 2 of the items that have largely been the discussion today. The third is the fare increase and the service optimisation. Now, there is always, in my view, a balance needs to be struck between you have a fare increase and passengers paying more, or do you maintain fares at a low level, but that will have a knock-on impact on services, because there are only, in my view, 4 levers to pull here. The first lever we're losing, because essentially the losses we've incurred at such a level that we can't continue to use lever 1, so that option, in my view, is now gone. In my view, the management overhead we're taking out is challenging, it's strident. I'm not aware of other arm's length bodies that are taking the same level of action. And in my view, when that's delivered, there will be, we can always strive for efficiency, and that's what our organisation will do, but I think the options become exceptionally limited. So it then becomes a balancing action between fare increase or service optimisation. And do you take the view that generally customers would rather pay a little bit more but still have a service, or do we maintain fares at such a level and have fewer services? And that's the balancing action that needs to be struck. We've put that forward to the department, and then obviously the department and the minister will ultimately decide where that falls.
But that's why, Chair, consultation is so important, which is even more frustrating why the department has short-circuited consultation in relation to this particular process. If the provider is seeking to know what the public would prefer to see happening, then there needs to be robust engagement with the Consumer Council and robust consultation with passengers. Another option, which hasn't been mentioned, is obviously increasing revenue through increased passengers as well. So whatever way this committee, department, Translink, Consumer Council can work together to try and promote public transport, better access to it, better ticketing. We need to, there's clearly a huge challenge to do this here, given the extremely difficult and serious situation Translink finds itself in. But I hope today can be a start of better working in that respect, because the last few months has been a textbook how not to do it. Hopefully we can change that rapidly, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think your final point we shouldn't lose sight of, because we have been, it's easy to forget that last year we added 1 million fare-paying passengers to our total numbers, and the previous year 1.5 million. Before Christmas we put a new parking ride at Dundonald, which is rapidly filling. So there are still developments happening within the public transport network, which is growing numbers. The railways, for example, continues to grow by 70% year on year. So that shouldn't be forgotten.
And on one of your major routes, the 212 route, Kieran, we're still waiting a parking ride actually as well.
There's a couple of parking rides along the way which are actually filled.
Yes,
Granted, we could do more.
And there's a town with no parking ride facility, which you know well.
Parking ride, we've always said, is the one example. If you build it, they will come.
Declan.
Chair, thank you. I suppose reading through the briefing here today, I note the fact that you made reference to that the town service will be retained, but the frequency will be reviewed. I don't see it. I'm sort of concerned that I don't see much reference to rural services, because if you said earlier on, Kieran, that you're looking at the profit-making services, and I'm just concerned that if we take rural areas, you know, you can't reduce the frequency, you know, because you reduce the frequency of the service that goes through the sperms, then that means you can't. That's it. There's no service then. So I'm just very concerned about what impacts that's going to have in the most isolated rural areas. You know, areas like the sperms that the likes of myself and yourself represent up in which is very, very dispersed.
It would be unusual for an area where we run a bus service. We would tend to have a couple of departures a day at least, and we would run through the week. And when you talk about reductions in frequency, you know, you're always starting with where we are at the moment. Do you go from a situation where you run 5 days a week or 7 days a week down to 4 days a week, for example? So frequency reductions always are in those terms. But really, what we want to do as part of the consultation is to list as wide a range of services as possible and try and get a very detailed picture, almost on the individual basis, what people rely on, and what, for example, even down to what days of the week they travel to a local hospital, to a local health centre, what day do they do the shopping. So as far as possible, we will always be in a position where people do have an alternative. And rural services are part of that, as are town services. As are services in Belfast, for example, there's parts of the Belfast network that we're also looking at in terms of frequency. But the starting point is to cast the net as widely as possible and then try and get feedback from as many people as possible.
You see, you made reference earlier that you're going to engage in extensive and meaningful consultation. And specifically, again, I'm just using rural as an example because I feel it hasn't been referenced here. What sort of extensive and meaningful consultation will you be engaging in? And importantly, what steps will you take? Or how will you rule-proof any decisions that you might make in relation to future services?
Well, specifically the consultation itself, I expect to have on our website from early next week. That will list the Ulster Bus network, group it basically by district or by area. So if you're interested in Antrim, go to Antrim, we'll list the services that we're reviewing, and there'll then be a questionnaire where people can give the details of their travel and requirements. On top of that, we are requiring each of our district managers to make questionnaires available through their own network. Also to have open days at bus stations or council areas if it's more appropriate. We'll be writing to each of the MLAs, we'll be writing to all councils, basically directing them towards the consultation we're doing and asking for a return. And rural proofing is one of the, whenever we're considering the returns that we get, as I say, protection of the network as far as possible is one of our priorities.
And I have to say, I know it's not strictly your responsibility, but I also heard the Minister reference this morning to the funding for the rail transport partnerships. Now, that would be a complete double blow to rural areas if, on one hand, there was any reduction in the services that are happening, combined funding for the likes of Rural Link, which is a lifeline for people in Iceland. Very vulnerable people.
Yeah.
Thanks, Declan. And Kieran, just before I go to the chair, could I actually ask, do all these reductions mean that the likes of the entire Limavady Borough Council area will continue not to be served by a park and ride on the main A6 route?
The park and ride, to a degree, is a separate issue.
Yes, I know, I understand, but it's obviously...
and I've no doubt, I don't have a specific update on the park and ride within that area, but rest assured, if we get a site for park and ride, we build it.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Chair, when will we be positioned to know what routes that you are reviewing?
If I get the consultation started, as I expect early next week, I will likely run it to the end of March, and then we'll probably take April to make the decision. You know.
Will we know then during March what routes you're looking at?
Well, during March, yes. As I say, the consultation will list and provide details of all the services that we're reviewing.
Chair, sorry to cut across. Declan, can I suggest that it might be worth presenting that to the committee in order to try and enhance and improve the consultation process as much as we can?
Happy to.
Yeah.
Stephen, you were next.
Just a couple of points. The 13 towns that were initially identified that would lose their town services, and now there'll be a reduced service. Will there be a reduced service across all those 13 towns?
We don't have a definitive view on that. That the consultation.
Yeah. And what impact is there likely to be on the Belfast-Dublin Airport bus route?
We have recently reduced the frequency of services through the night. Off the top of my head, that's the only impact that we're contemplating at the moment.
So there'll be no further impact in relation to that?
There'll be no further impact, but having said that, the consultation is very deliberately open-ended. Okay. So if people have a specific comment on that service, we'll take that into account.
I don't want to put you on the spot, Kieran, but can you put on the first bus that goes to Dublin Airport in the morning then? Because I know in my constituency in Banbridge, it was very well utilised.
There are still buses through the night.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just a reduced service, less of them?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Just on that, and I apologise, I had to step out there for a few minutes, but Kieran, are you going to hand money back to DFP now, that additional money you've got actually to protect the town services?
Sorry.
In the last monitoring round, you've got additional money. Can't remember millions of pounds.
Sure. It's the budget for next year that we received. It wasn't specified how much it was, but it was 5 million for both town bus services and roads maintenance as well. So that it relates to next financial year from April onwards. So it's
that
not
5 million was.
Yeah, yeah.
So, given we're hearing then you're going to cut some of the service, are you going to give some of that money back?
Well, my understanding is that that money is given to essentially enable. The original proposal was that there would be no town service in those areas.
All right, okay.
That is not going to be the case.
All right, David, you were next.
Thank you. I don't know where you were, but I left the room earlier and apologise. I just wanted to clear my head. I'm very conscious of the sensitivities and the upfrontness that there's been. Appreciated, and I've got to say, Chairman, when a professional with qualities like David Strahan lays it on the line as he has this morning, well, we need to pay attention. I know we're going to do that. I've got to say, I'm genuinely sorry you're leaving, and I do wish you all the best for the very future. But it seems to me, just trying to work my head through all of this. Will you tell me that we're not witnessing some kind of set-up journey of the consequential demise of TransLink 2015-16 to put it out of business and produce a proposal for a new TransLink 2017?
Yeah, sorry, you asked him. So, look, the department's policy in relation to TransLink is clear. We see it as central to the provision of public transport and are committed to ensuring that it's as successful as possible. Obviously, we're dealing with an extremely challenging financial situation, and taking a point made at the committee today, we're happy to work with Consumer Council, TransLink, in trying to, and yourselves in trying to come up with an effective strategy to ensure that that's the case.
I think above all, the assurance needs to be given to the public that, if I'm hearing it right, if there's a rescue process going on now to enable this company to trade properly, and there is some kind of failure in that, we just cannot either leave the workforce or, equally important, the public without a transport service. And that's why I'm asking such a precise question, in that I don't really want to hear that you're preparing for that, but I do trust that somebody is preparing for it.
Can I possibly just, if I may, Mr. McNary, on that point? That is what's motivating me and our board and our executive team in the proposals we're making, because we want to see a strong future for TransLink and its employees. The point I made at the start, and I make again, is that the path we're on and the funding we're currently facing is not sustainable if we don't take action, and that's why we're putting forward, unpalatable to us all as they are. That's exactly why we're making these steps and why I'm bringing them forward.
I took your first comment, and I think Cathal O'Hushin as well took it on. It set the tone for this meeting as far as I was concerned. The position that I think we find ourselves in is it's not something that there can be any delays with, Chairman. It seems to me to be urgent by necessity, and I gather from what you've said that that's how you're treating it, and I do respect that, and thank you. Thanks, Chairman.
Cathal, do you want that?
Chair, I'm just cognizant, again, as a rural representative, that any consultation on service provision will not just only identify the non-profitable routes and leave the isolated, the vulnerable, and rural dwellers, the disabled and the elderly. And that's my concern, because in consultation it can often be weighted to profitable routes, the ones most used, all the rest of them, and ignore the commitment that should be there to service provision for all those lesser represented groups in society.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That sums it up. Maybe, and David, this is the first time I've seen you, especially since your announcement. And I mean, like David McNary, I'm sure like other members, we're all sorry to see you leave, because certainly in the short term you're there, and whilst today's what we're talking about is difficult, maybe it's something that should have started much sooner, some of the restructuring within the organisation, and then maybe we wouldn't be facing just such a dramatic difficulties that we are today. So I have to thank you for the short term you are there, the work you have done and you've started, and do wish you well on what you're going to do in the future. Just unfortunate, would love to see you stand, because I mean, and I'm relatively new here. I think we probably joined approximately around the same time, but from an outsider who wasn't in DRD committee, following TransLink just as a member of the public, I think previous people hadn't the same vision as yourself, and I mean, and it was very evident very soon, as you get into position, that you had the right vision and you were going to drive the organisation in the right direction. It's unfortunate that it's just a short time you're having with the company, but do wish you well in your endeavours for the future.
Thank you, Chair. And if I may say as well, I've appreciated, while I've no doubt this won't be my last appearance at the committee before I leave, I've enjoyed working with the committee. I'm a simple individual. I've been open to engagement with all the members, and I'm happy to do so between now and my departure in September.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Take your time. Right, members, agenda item number 8, the road traffic speed limit bill. Refer members to page 54 of the pack. Can inform members that we have been provided with the motion to extend the committee stage, the draft forward work programme and the draft signposting advert. So can I ask members are they content that the committee tables the motion to extend the committee stage of the bill to the 16th of October 2015?
Yes, agreed.
Are members content with the draft forward work programme in relation to the bill? Are members content that the draft signposting advertisement is placed in the local press on the 24th of March with a consultation period of 6 weeks? Yeah. Agenda item number 9, inquiry into the benefits of cycling to the economy. Refer members to page 60 of their pack and ask members, are the members content that the committee tables the motion in relation to this inquiry into the benefits of cycling?
No.
So say all of us.
Yes.
I take it that was just a miss of the tongue, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't.
Do you want to propose?
Propose what?
Propose the motion?
No, yeah. Are members agreed?
Agreed. Wholeheartedly, yes.
Voted.
Agenda item number 11, subordinate legislation not subject to assembly procedure. Refer members to page 62 in their pack and ask members to note that the Road Races Circuit of Ireland Order Northern Ireland 2015 and the Parking Places of Roads Coaches Order Northern Ireland 2015. Agenda item number 10, any other business. Can remind members that the committee will be joining the Belfast Public Hire Taxi on a tour of Belfast on Wednesday 11th of March, 10 to 12. Sure. We hope this is the third time lucky. Also inform members that an effective questioning session has been arranged for Wednesday, the 18th of March in Lamont House Hotel from 9:30 to 1 p.m. This is a follow-up session that ran the 25th of June 14 and will once again be facilitated by Kate Farragher. Date and time of the next meeting will be 10 a.m. room 21 Parliament Buildings on Wednesday the 25th of March. Meeting's closed.
Committee room 21. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee room 21.